Donald Trump will become president again, claiming a decisive electoral college win across most of the country. We'll check in with you a lot during today's show, how you're reacting, what the results say to you, and how you're thinking about the future.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Then we'll get some much-needed historical perspective from Pulitzer Prize-winning historian Doris Kearns-Goodwin. What can we glean about this present moment from America's past, and whether this divided nation can ever come together again? All that ahead on Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library. Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. NPR has learned Vice President Kamala Harris is set to telephone President-elect Donald Trump to concede the presidential election. She's also set to make public remarks later. Before dawn today, the Associated Press called the election for Trump. He won in key swing states, including North Carolina, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. NPR's Asma Khalid says exit polls show voters are worried about the high cost of living and may be thinking of lower prices when Trump was last in office.
There is certainly a level of nostalgia that some folks have, particularly for those first 3 years of the Trump administration, in which the economy was, by many metrics, doing quite well. And it seems like many folks don't seem to blame him for the pandemic and the way that the economy shifted. And really, there were a number of job losses, right? And the economy kind of came to a standstill for a chunk of time then.
NPR's Asma Khalid reporting. Republicans have also succeeded in flipping the Senate. NPR's Windsor Johnston reports the GOP has the majority of seats it needs to take control of the Senate next year.
Republicans picked up 3 seats. Bernie Moreno defeated Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown in Ohio. Republican Jim Justice flipped West Virginia's seat back to red, and Republican Tim Sheehy has defeated Democratic Senator John Tester in Montana. Republicans also fought off Democratic challengers in Texas and in Florida. The GOP will now have to choose a new Senate Majority Leader. This after Republican leader Mitch McConnell announced earlier this year that he would retire from the position after the election. Windsor Johnston, NPR News. 2 incoming Democratic senators will become the first black women to represent their states. Delaware's Lisa Blunt Rochester and Maryland's Angela Also Brooks have won their races. Also, Delaware Democrat Sarah McBride will become the first openly transgender person to be elected to Congress. She'll serve in the House of Representatives. Ukraine's president has called Donald Trump to congratulate him on his victory. Trump has promised to stop aid to Ukraine. NPR's Joanna Kakissis reports from Kyiv Trump is not trusted by many Ukrainians who see him as too close to Russia's Kremlin.
Writing on social media, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said he appreciated what he calls Trump's peace through strength approach in global affairs. Ukraine's lawmakers and business leaders are also trying to stay optimistic. Oleksandr Kolenkov, who leads Ukraine's Association of Steel and Iron Companies, says he respects the choice of U.S. voters.
And we have to deal with the outcome of this choice. At the same time, I see that Ukraine supported by vast majority of American people, and it's bipartisan choice.
He said he hopes congressional discussions about aid to Ukraine will now become less politicized. Joanna Kakissis, NPR News, Kyiv.
This is NPR.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Massachusetts voters approved eliminating MCAS as a high school graduation requirement by passing Question 2. That leaves the Bay State as one of the few states without a common graduation standard. Mass Teachers Association was behind the ballot question. MTA Vice President Deb McCarthy told supporters that the union will fight any intervention by the legislature.
We are committed to defend our win, and we are not going to let anybody take it away from us. Right. The people have spoken, and we are going to be united, protecting the win of Question 2.
The change means that school districts across the state can now set their own criteria for graduation. And as we've been hearing, Donald Trump is headed back to the White House. He's the first former president to win back the office after losing it since Grover Cleveland in 1892. Around 5:30 this morning, the Associated Press called Wisconsin for Trump, giving him a projected 277 electoral votes to Vice President Kamala Harris's 224, with 37 electoral votes still undecided at that time. Candidate needs, of course, 270 electoral votes to win, and Trump appears poised to secure most of those outstanding votes as well. And if so, it would give him a larger victory than the 304 Electoral College votes that he won in 2016. Celtics host the Golden State Warriors at the Garden tonight. Mostly sunny, near 80 degrees today. That's some good news. 74 right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Insperity, providing HR services and technology, from payroll, benefits, and HR compliance to talent development. Learn more at Insperity.com/HR Matters. And the Doris Duke Foundation.
He's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Thank you very much. It was a late night or an early morning, so if you come down to see the show at the Boston Public Library, we have a free cup of coffee to offer you, or tea, of course, on GBH.
You're paying for this?
My bosses are paying
Your boss?
for this.
Okay, good.
That's right.
That's actually very generous.
Later this hour, we're thrilled to have historian Doris Kearns Goodwin join us to put this whole situation in perspective. Hello, Jim.
Hi there. I'll tell you, there's nothing like doing a 3-hour radio show on 3 hours sleep. I don't know about you.
I know.
But and I bet I'm not alone. I've spoken to so many people this morning, as have you. We're going to get to your calls in a minute at 877-301-8970 and your text. I just want to say, people have spoken, and you may not like what they had to say, but they spoke loudly. A friend said to me this morning, I told you this is not who we are, to which I responded, this is exactly who we are. This was not a squeaker for Donald Trump. This was a landslide for Trump. Even in states that he didn't win, like New York, we were talking about this morning.
Oh, yeah.
The margin for the Democrat who did win the state was much smaller. In New York State, for example, I think it was 13 points smaller than it was last time around. Obviously, the American people didn't believe or care that Trump was a felon. They didn't believe or care that he'd assaulted women, that he attempted to overthrow the government he'll now lead again, that he traded in racism and misogyny. And maybe they want a leader who will deport millions of people, who will treat our allies poorly, embrace the Kim Jong-uns and the Putins, abandon Ukraine, but in the hopes that maybe they're going to improve their personal finances a little bit. But regardless, the issue is resolved for now. And I guess what I'd say is, if you're among the people who voted for Kamala Harris or who voted against Donald Trump, it's time to figure out what went wrong and how to fix it. The number is 877-301-8970.
Well, I must say, I'm sad. I'm very sad about what happened. I'm a little nervous. You know, we're going to have not one unhinged person. I've always thought Donald Trump was unhinged, but we're going to have one unhinged person joined by Elon Musk, and RFK Jr. is probably going to be the new Dr. Fauci.
Did you hear the crowd at Trump's thing last night chanting Bobby, Bobby,
yeah.
Bobby?
And I also think, the things you think you want to teach your children about honesty and respect for other people and empathy and grace and just common decency seem not to matter. The public character, I'm less concerned about his private character, but the public character of Donald Trump doesn't seem to matter. But I'm also mad at the Democrats and Joe Biden for not listening to Democrats, the voters, who said Biden was too old and he shouldn't run again. He should stick to what he said what he was going to be, which is a transitional president.
You mean long before the debate?
Yes, and I'm mad that that they didn't listen to Democrats' real concerns about the economy and about the surge in immigration over the southern border, and they didn't demand a primary so that there could have been debate among the Gretchen Whitmers, Kamala Harris, Josh Shapiro.
Like Carville suggested, because
I think that really helps you hone your message. So I think the Democrats made some errors here too.
Okay, so what we did today is we shortened the guest list. Don't worry, Doris Kearns Goodwin is 20 minutes away. To make as much time for you to talk about the events of last night. Obviously, Americans took to the polls in huge numbers. He passed the 270 electoral vote threshold with a win in Wisconsin. He is ahead in the popular vote as of the moment by a few million votes. And as you heard on the news, Kamala Harris is yet to concede. The news said she'd be calling Donald Trump, and she is scheduled to speak later today. Obviously, if it happens between 11 and 2, we'll bring that to you live. As you know, Trump's first term ended with that attempted insurrection, falsely claiming the election in 2020 was rigged. His second term is likely beginning with unfettered power. Obviously, control of the White House, control of the Senate, control of the Supreme Court, and shockingly, in light of the predictions, he may end up controlling every branch of government, including the House of Representatives. That's unresolved. Here's an amazing moment last night with CNN's John King and Jake Tapper. John was with us yesterday predicting it would take days. I think he was as shocked as we were. Here he and Tapper talking about Harris's underwhelming performance or Trump's overwhelming performance. Here they are.
So you asked, are there any places that the vice president is overperforming Joe Biden in 2020? So we can show you that as well. We just bring that out here. Harris overperforming in 2020.
Holy smokes.
There you go.
Literally nothing?
Literally nothing.
Literally not one county?
Literally not one county. So the lines are open, 877-301-8970. And in and around our guests who are kind enough to join us today, we will be taking your calls and texts all day long at 877-301-8970. Reuters is reporting that the Vice President, Kamala Harris, will deliver a speech conceding tonight at 6 o'clock. Is that today? Yes, 6 o'clock today, and I'm sure you'll hear that right here on 89.7.
Did you see the text underneath that?
No, I didn't. Yeah, I do now, yes.
Tom from New Hampshire. How am I coping? I have a 6-pack for brunch, and I'll be fine.
You can come down and get a free coffee, too. Let's start with Hector in Boston. Hector, welcome to the show. Thank you for calling. Hi.
Greetings, Jim and Marjorie. I'm a long-time listener.
Thank you.
Long-time caller, first time on air.
Thank you.
I just wanted to, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble here with my echo.
Oh, just wait. I'm sorry. That's our problem, Hector. We can hear you, so just go ahead.
So do your best. I'm sorry, Hector. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I just wanted to say that I think voters were very disillusioned with Harris for many reasons. I personally voted for Donald Trump. I'm not a huge fan of him, but I did vote for him for many reasons, and I think that the media played a huge role in this election, just like it did the last one.
How so?
And
how so, Hector?
I'm a huge fan of RFK too. I was really hoping that he would stay in the race.
No. I meant about the media. How did the media play a huge role in the outcome you were suggesting?
Well, I've heard a few times, specifically here on the radio, on your channel, Bobby Kennedy being labeled as an anti-vaxxer.
Because he is.
Just the other day.
Because he is. I've
He's
said that.
He's actually very pro-vaccine.
Well, actually, with all due respect, Hector, and he is not. I've done a lot of research on this.
But Hector, tell me why you're disillusioned with Harris. What was it that she didn't do or did do that bothered you?
Well, everything about her. But I will say that I did vote for Biden and Harris.
Yeah.
At the last election. I feel like we don't know anything about her. I think she just reads a teleprompter. She has very little character. And
why
really
Hector, just one thing. Why does she have very little character?
Why? Well, from what we've been able to see, she has shown very little to the American
With all
people.
due respect, Hector, I don't think this is, I'm sorry to say this, an honest phone call. It is fine to say you prefer Trump's policies. To talk about character and that the candidate you're criticizing is Kamala Harris is incredible to me. Having said that, Thank you for your call, Hector. We appreciate it. There's a Trump voter explaining his vote for the president-elect.
But you know what I got to point out again? Once again, white women. We've talked a lot about black men, Latino men, all the the people of color vote. White women. Once again, 52% of white women voted for Donald Trump. So you got to ask yourself. I mean, again, most of us would not like to be, sexually assaulted. I just think it's so odd that doesn't bother my fellow white women. What is
Did you see
wrong?
Latino numbers?
Yeah.
33-point swing.
Yeah.
And Latino men in particular. Latino overall, Harris won Latinos by 8 points. That was a 33-point swing from Biden's margin. And Latino men, by I think it was 10 points, actually voted for Donald Trump. So we'd love to hear from such a person here today at 877-301-8970. Nick, you're in New York. Thank you for calling. Hi.
Yes. Yeah, hi. I wish Harris had hired Sue O'Connell to be her media consultant.
What'd she do wrong?
The strategy was terrible. She should have appeared on TV 2 to 3 times a week answering questions from reporters and voters.
Yeah, there was a lot of criticism, including from fellow Democrats early on, that she was not making herself available to the media regularly.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why Carville and other people thought there should have been a primary first, so you could see the Democratic people
and also,
in action.
Pelosi and Schumer should have forced Biden out of the race before the start of the primary.
I think that's actually a pretty good point, and I think Marjorie agrees with that. Nick, thanks for the call. Appreciate it.
Well, remember all the polls for months before the election and people's horror when he announced he was going to run again, and it was just kind of ignored. I don't get
Including
that.
by you. 5 million votes, the national popular vote, 5 million vote margin by Donald Trump. So you can't say anymore, well, Donald Trump has never won the popular vote, because that's a huge margin, almost as big as Biden's.
The
7 million a couple of years ago.
Electoral college argument that we often have. I mean, he walloped in the electoral college, and he did really well in the popular vote as well. And the other thing too, you wonder, there's a big blow up the whole thing up thing going on here, I think, with Trump and a lot of people that voted for him. People's lives are not working very well, and I think that even though some of the policies, I don't get how Trump's policy is going to help the working class of America, but there's a sense that things are not working. And you don't have to go just to working class people. I mean, you can't buy a house in Massachusetts anymore. You can't afford your child care anymore. Those aren't his. We'll see if he does something about those policies. But J.D. Vance's idea about what to do about child care costs was to have grandmothers, postmenopausal women, take care of the children, and that's not going to work.
Harris talked a lot about those
issues.
She
did. Elizabeth Warren talked about it when she ran for president. 7% of your income, no more than that, to go to child care. But we don't get anywhere with those policies. I think it makes people's lives very difficult. Dennis in the car, thank you for calling.
Hello, Dennis.
Hi there. I just wanted to say a couple of things. One, turning on the radio today, it was really heartening to hear both of your voices. I actually was wondering if you might not come in and you might hear substitutes, because so many people I know are so distraught and wanting to hide.
Yeah.
So
Dennis, can I say something before you continue?
Dennis,
I want to say something in response. I hope you don't think this is because of what you said. One of the reasons we were dying to come in today is because we'd have an opportunity to talk to people who lived through yesterday. So it's a two-way street, my friend. Keep going.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we're all in this community together. In terms of what went wrong or any of that, I guess I'm not as interested in Monday morning quarterbacking. I fear that there's not much that could have been done differently when a black woman was running for the office. I heard the caller 2 callers ago just sort of vaguely say, I don't like her, without putting his finger on much, and that to me speaks volumes of what really motivates a lot of these voters. I do think, though, to quote Winston Churchill, don't let any good crisis go to waste. This might be a really good time to look forward at the party, what changes can be made. In my view, this goes back 30-plus years to the Clinton years of this gradual walking away from the working class, NAFTA, unions going under, and, it could take us that long to get out of it, but We have to not lose faith and just keep on keeping on like you guys are right now. So,
Dennis, thanks.
you for
I
that.
am guessing
And,
that line about don't let any good crisis go to waste is going to be part of the theme of Doris Kearns Goodwin when she joins us in about 15 minutes. Because we are where we are. Dennis, thanks.
When John King and other people, obviously reporters everywhere, were out interviewing people in Michigan, which was one of the swing states, which of course Harris did not do well in. And NAFTA was a big subject. I mean, that was Bill Clinton's. Who was, of course, a Democrat, and the idea that this was going to help the working man and woman of America, and it didn't. And I think that's one of the things where Trump had another enormous appeal. People that lost their jobs in the auto industry, and with the Chrysler company it's not Chrysler anymore, whatever the company is that replaced it, laid off from their jobs, and they blamed EVs. Brendan, it's interesting, really. People are mad about the EVs, and Musk is right next to the guy that can't stand electric cars. Isn't that kind of weird?
I think that's a bit too much nuance for much of America, Marjorie. Brendan in Belmont. Hello there.
Oh, hi.
Hi. Hi, Brendan.
I'll preface with the fact that I purposely avoided a lot of information coming up to the election, so I forgive me for my ignorance if I say anything wrong. I did vote for Harris. I didn't vote in the last election, and I voted for Clinton in 2016. I'm 26 years old. I very much value the reproductive rights. My girlfriend is a strong proponent of that. But I do believe that there are people in the Republican and the Democratic Party that will not let Trump be the dictator that the media makes him out to be. And that's not an accusation to your network at all. I love your network. I love what you do. But I don't know. He talks a big game. I don't think he's all about it.
I hope you're right, Brendan, because I think a lot of people are very nervous about his claims he's going to go after people, he's going to jail his enemies. I hope you're right. And by the way, on the reproductive front...
Thank you, Brendan.
I think one of the big takeaways is a lot of people... In seven of the 10 states that voted to protect reproductive rights, they won. They didn't win in Florida, they didn't win in South Dakota, but they won.
You got 57% in Florida, but you need 60% to amend the Constitution.
So that was a big deal. But a lot of people who voted to protect reproductive rights also voted for Republicans.
Yep, they did.
And I think a lot of people who voted that way did not believe that Donald Trump was really anti-choice. And I think even though we appointed the 3 Supreme Court justices that took away Roe, I think he realized very quickly what a political disaster that was, the taking away Roe for Republicans, and he's moved himself away from it. He's been a little bit all over the map, but you hear many women that were voting for him say that. They didn't think he was really going to do anything. And do you think there's going to be a national ban on abortion now? Absolutely not.
Well, I don't know. You once said that Roe v. Wade wouldn't be repealed.
Yeah, but if you have every single state practically that's had this on the ballot, they've had Republicans voting to protect abortion rights. So I think this is not really a partisan issue that much anymore.
So,
anyway.
By the way, before we leave, that caller, Brendan, was honest enough to say hasn't been following the news much. One of my favorite stories that Jamie, our colleague, was kind enough to give us this morning. Anybody want to guess what one of the most searched items was on Google Trends a day or two before the election? Anybody know what it is out here? I'll tell you. Did Joe Biden drop out of the presidential race? This is a top search item immediately before people voted these last couple of, why am I laughing, days. In any case, do we have to take a break? I can't. What are we doing today? We have to take a break, Marjorie. Hello.
Oh, we have to take a break. Okay. We're taking a break, and we're going to keep talking to you about this virtually all day. We're going to have a few guests, including Doris Kearns Goodwin, in just a couple of minutes. But we're mostly going to take your calls and texts to the end of the day. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Across the globe, a lot of eyes have been following the U.S. presidential election and who will be the next occupant of the Oval Office. Our reporters on both sides of the Atlantic have the latest news and reactions to it. We'll hear voices from the Middle East, Europe, and Latin America, plus the day's top headlines. That's coming up next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer.
The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds from utility bills, uncashed paychecks, savings accounts, and more. To see if you have unclaimed money, you can visit findmassmoney.gov. And Boston Children's Hospital, ranked the #1 pediatric hospital in the world by Newsweek. Boston Children's, where the world comes for answers. bostonchildrens.org/answers.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan and Jim Browdy. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. If you come down to see the show today at the library, Marjorie apparently is buying you a free cup of coffee or tea. Actually, GBH is in the spirit of the moment. If you're just tuning in, we're getting a reaction to the results from last night. If you want to talk about moving forward and what the agenda should be, that's fine too. Karen from Minnesota texts and says, please look inside yourselves. This is a tired conversation. You not understanding the majority of Americans. If you really want to know what happened, listen, don't talk. That's fine. And you should, I would love you to call Karen at 877-301-8970. We promise we will listen to you and learn what we are missing. So please do that if you have the time. Kate in the car, hi.
Hi, Jim and Marjorie. This actually is a perfect segue. I'm sorry, I'm having an echo right now.
I know.
We're having
so
some
sorry,
problem
everybody.
with the phones, and we apologize. We've been trying to fix it, not very successfully.
But we hear you fine, so do your best, Kate, if you can, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I called you on Monday to talk about reasons I was voting for Trump, and we had a somewhat heated debate.
Oh, I remember you,
appreciate.
Kate. Yeah, I remember you. Thank you. No, I do. You were great.
I'm calling back just to let you know a couple other things that I think really push this election in Trump's favor. Generation X was a big demographic that went for him, as well as young voters. And I really think that you need to look back at the way COVID was handled in this country. Generation X were taking care of their children and their parents. And those are the two populations that suffered the most under COVID. And we really came out to vote because our ability to talk about it was censored. And that I was one from the beginning that fought against school closures. And I was, told I was stupid or didn't know the science. And there was no forum for us to have an honest discussion about how these two populations were suffering. And I think it really made people mad. And this was almost a vindication and holding people accountable.
Kate, can I just ask you a quick question? I hear you, and we appreciate your thought. I am one, just so it's clear, who think that of the million Americans who died, several hundred thousand didn't have to die, but died because of the irresponsible behavior of then-President Trump. You don't agree with that?
I don't, but I respect your opinion, and to have a debate about it, I think is healthy.
Okay.
I do think that mistakes were made, and that was something, as a Trump supporter, I was very mad about the way he handled COVID.
Okay.
But I blame most of it on the Biden administration,
Okay.
the mandates that were put in place.
We hear you, Kate. We got to go.
No, because I think she touched on something that's really important, that the states like Florida, which had kids back in school, did not have any worse outcomes of COVID than states didn't. And I think there was a sense, and I felt this too, Kate, that teachers are essential workers, like nurses and doctors are essential workers, and the idea that we're going to disrupt everybody's lives to that degree and screw up kids to that degree, we made a big mistake. I think we made a big mistake. The only excuse I can offer is that obviously teachers were afraid of being in the classroom with those kids and getting COVID, and we were in the midst of a pandemic. But I think Kate is totally right about how COVID undermined a lot of people's belief in science and facts and all these kind of things. I mean, look at what Fauci went through.
Kate, thank you. By the way, call us again, please. When you say lost their faith in science,
yes,
I would argue that the faux science being advanced at that podium in the press room by Donald Trump at those everyday press conferences is what undermined the faith in science.
Well,
I'm not quarreling with you about the schools.
But look at we talked about taking fluoride out of the water yesterday.
Fluoride, yeah.
Fluoride out of the water, which
RFK wants to do.
Most scientists say is, unless you have the wrong amount of it, it's not going to give you any diseases. It's not going to put spots in your teeth. It's going to help you. I was pummeled with people saying fluoride does these terrible things to you, that we should take fluoride
Well, they're
out of the
wrong.
water.
So what?
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. People lost their faith in science and facts, and COVID had something to do with that. It has absolutely something to do with that. I mean, you have people still believing that vaccines have given them COVID vaccines, and you have this whole movement of fewer and fewer parents getting their kids vaccinated for measles, mumps, and rubella, stuff that I don't know why anybody wants their kid to get measles, mumps, or rubella, but vaccine adherence is on the downswing.
Mike and Everett, welcome to the show. Thank you for calling. We're going to have Doris Kearns-Goodwin in about 3 minutes. Hi, Mike.
Hey, Jim and Audrey. Michael, I was a city councilor in Everett.
Oh, hey, Mike. Good to speak to you. What's up?
Good to see you guys. So I was in Pennsylvania Monday and Tuesday, knocking on doors. And I think we learned a lot from Hillary Clinton's campaign. The problem was Kamala ran a special election. Trump ran for 12 years.
That's a good
the time
point.
frame in which they had to ID their vote and pull their vote out was not enough to be able to overcome his machine of 12 years.
Well, it's possible. She only ran, 108, 109 days. I have to say, while I can find fault with some things she did too, I thought, considering the constricted time frame, I thought she ran a pretty amazing campaign. The only fault I'd find with it is the inability to figure out how to separate from Biden without being disrespectful to Biden, and I think she failed on that. And when you look at the exit polls and how dispirited people are about the state of this country in the 70% range, you know that Biden, rightly or wrongly, was a real drag on her.
Well,
Mike,
also,
thanks for the call.
Also, I never thought she gave really good answers about the economy. It was perfectly understandable that we did have inflation because we're hitting all those checks because people lost their jobs during COVID, and the checks were signed by Donald Trump. So people had that extra money. They had the child care tax credit. Remember that helped raise half of the children of America out of poverty. That all came from Trump during COVID. That went away later on, and I think that would obviously that made a difference in people's lives, and they blame Biden for it.
Before we take a break, I told you that Reuters was reporting that the vice president would speak and concede at 6. CNN is reporting that she will speak and concede after having called President-elect Trump at 4 o'clock this afternoon. And I'm quite sure, Jamie, I'm sure to check that NPR will carry that live.
Okay, we have one. Do we have time for any more
No, we
calls?
don't. But can I just say, there are a ton of calls, which we knew would happen today. In and around our guests, we're going to continue to hear from many of you. So don't be dispirited. We'll hear from some wonderful guests, and then we'll continue with you.
Okay. After this, we are going to talk with Pulitzer Prize-winning historian Doris Kearns-Goodwin, who knows more about presidents than almost anybody on earth. She's going to
including the president.
That's right. She's going to attempt to put all of what happened yesterday in perspective. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and broadcasting live on youtube.com/GBH News.
Coming up tonight, our series America Are We Ready will invite your calls on the results so far of the 2024 election, including the presidential race, the battle for control of Congress, and the many consequential ballot questions around the country. I'm Brian Lehrer. Join me and Fordham University political scientist Dr. Christina Greer as we grapple with the state of the vote and the state of the nation the day after the polls close. America Are We Ready?
Tonight at 8 on GBH 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And the International Conservation Fund in Boston, a charity working to avert climate change and biodiversity loss by partnering with NGOs and Indigenous peoples globally. More at internationalconservationfund.org. And Mass General Brigham Health Plan with Medicare Advantage plans that combine comprehensive coverage, including prescription, dental, and vision connected to expert care. Plan details are at mgbadvantage.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan and Jim Browdy. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We know it was a late night, so as we said, GBH, our colleagues, our bosses, were kind enough to say they would spot you a cup of coffee or tea if you were to join us today at the library, and we hope you take advantage of that. We're joined now, by the way, I would have to say, if Marjorie and I were asked, tell me this is not right, if you could pick one guest to have the day after last night, in the world, who would you pick?
She's
exactly.
Right here.
So we're joined now at the that is totally true, Doris Kearns Goodwin, at the library desk by Pulitzer Prize winning historian Doris Kearns Goodwin. Her latest book, The Leadership Journey: How 4 Kids Became President, which is more important for your kids to read now than ever. Author of bestsellers, An Unfinished Love Story, A Personal History of the 60s, and of course, Team of Rivals, The Political Genius of Abraham Lincoln. So last night, Trump declared victory in a speech in front of his supporters early this morning.
Frankly, this was, I believe, the greatest political movement of all time. There's never been anything like this in this country, and maybe beyond.
Doris Kearns Goodwin joins us now. Doris, we are so thankful you made time for us. Thanks for being here.
So, Doris Kearns Goodwin, you just heard what the president-elect said. There's never been anything like this in this country, and maybe beyond, talking about his greatest political movement of all time. Is he right?
I don't know that it's a movement. It certainly was a sweeping victory. There's no question. And that's what democracy is. Democracy gives you a chance to vote your leaders in and then vote them out. And I think what happened mostly was that Kamala Harris was not able to separate herself, as we've been saying, from Biden. Biden's support was 40%. Large numbers felt we were on the wrong track. And the economy was really hurting a lot of people. I mean, all the optimistic messages, I thought they were the right messages, actually, at the time. I looked at all the other presidential candidates, and only the ones with optimistic messages won in history. I mean, FDR amazingly was able to say, happy days are here again at the height of the Depression, and people felt good about the confidence and the optimism that he projected. JFK talked about high hopes. And Ronald Reagan always had an optimistic temperament. The We Shall Overcome was the anthem of the civil rights movement. It was we shall believe, we shall overcome. And Obama was hope versus fear. And somehow when Trump was talking in those last weeks about a sick society and an America in decline, it seemed against the idea that our economy, as everybody was saying, is better than any in the world. But people didn't feel that. The people who have been working class people, whether they're white or black or brown, they've experienced hard times. I mean, they have only a certain amount of money in their checking account. You know, one of the things LBJ said, listen to this. This is in 1964 when he wins big, obviously. He said, what the man in the street wants is not a big debate on fundamental issues. He wants a little medical care. He wants a rug on the floor. He wants a picture on the wall, a little music in the house, and a place to take Molly and the grandchildren when he retires. A lot of people don't feel that sense of security. They may be working 3 jobs. They have nothing to save. They can't take a person on vacation. They're deciding between whether they have enough money for prescriptions or for something else. And that was what was being felt. The economy they may have really poor timing. It may do very well soon, and wages are going up already, and inflation may go down, but people didn't feel it. And somehow, even as hard as I think she ran a very good campaign, given what she could do. And yet she was still tied to the past. And incumbencies are losing all over the world right now. It's hard to be a democracy when there's a populist movement which is based often on grievances, and you can't satisfy them, because it's hard. The globalization and technological stuff is screwing up people all over the world. People are being hurt.
So when you say, despite a good campaign and her best efforts, she couldn't disconnect herself, for lack of a better expression, from the Biden record that people didn't like, would that suggest that the color of her skin and her gender had very little to do with this outcome in your estimation?
No, I'm sure that had something to do with it as well. I'm sure there was racism. I'm sure there was sexism. But I think fundamentally, it was that ability, because the economy played a huge role. You look at what people were saying. And that's their daily life. You know, you can tell them, oh, it's going well, but they're not feeling it when they wake up in the morning. They're not feeling it when they go to bed worried at night. And this has been a long-standing problem. I think the Democrats have lost the working class people that was the base of their party for a long period of time. And what it has to do with free trade, it has to do with globalization. It's very hard to figure out what to do when the manufacturing base goes and people feel their community has gone away. And there's not a sense of social connection to the people that they had before. So it's a long-standing problem. But the time right now, what Democrats have to do is to pick themselves up and then figure out what went wrong, and things turn around. Look, after that great race in 1964, when LBJ won by a landslide, 2 years later, Ronald Reagan becomes governor of California, and the Republicans figured out how to argue what the role of government was, and then they win elections. Then they lose, and the next people come. We've got to take hope in the knowledge that these things come and go, and the most important thing is not to give up, to keep fighting and just move forward, and not say, oh my God, what are we going to do? We can do things. That's what happens. Democrats can do things, Republicans do things, and we move on.
Living up to your self-description with Anderson Cooper the night before the election, where Doris Kearns Goodwin says, I'm an optimist. It's in my genes, or whatever you said. So that's one example. For the 47% of people who are unhappy today and think we are edging towards disaster, give us some history, Doris Kearns Goodwin, about low moments where we did emerge and how we did.
I mean, just think about what happened with Abraham Lincoln. You know, in that lowest moment when the country was totally split in two in 1861, he takes office and he said, can you imagine? I couldn't think I could have lived through what was going to go through. A terrible price had to be paid with a civil war. 600,000 people died, but America emerged stronger than ever before because we had done with restoring the Union, and emancipation was secured. But most importantly, I think there's a real lesson in what Lincoln did at the end of that war for President Trump now. And there was no retribution that he wanted, no punishment. A lot of his radical friends wanted him to let the generals be persecuted, be hung, not even let the people who'd been in the Confederate things stay in government in any way. He said, no, it's a time for healing. He said both sides read the same Bible, both prayed to the same God. Neither's prayers were fully answered in that great second inaugural. And then finally, with malice toward none and charity for all, let us bind up the nation's wounds. No nation was more split than that. We are split now, but that was even more, and we came through it, and we emerged stronger. We've got to remember that.
Did you read that book, Team of Rivals, by the way? It talks a little bit about that.
Yeah.
But wait,
hold on for a second. You just talked about malice toward none. Maybe he was just joking, but the former president, soon to be the next president, has malice toward many and talks about carrying out retribution against those many. So where does that leave us?
That will be a big mistake. And in the end, even though it may be that he has control of the government, in the end, public sentiment is what matters in this country. Citizens can make a difference. And if he goes in the direction of making real all those threats toward the generals, toward the firing squads, the country, I believe the citizens will not stand for that. And in the end, as Lincoln said, public sentiment is more important than anything else. With it, you can do anything. Without it, you can do nothing. In the early days, almost every change we've had in the society comes from the ground up. The anti-slavery movement was there before the Civil War, and that grew and grew and grew and finally produced the moral outrage towards slavery that ends slavery. The progressive movement was in the cities and states before Teddy Roosevelt took over. The civil rights movement was there for Lyndon Johnson. The women's movement, the gay rights movement, is going to be up to the citizens right now, and I still trust the American people. I still trust the citizens. They will not allow those things to happen. They will fight, and that's the fight that has to be made. We're not sure they're going to happen yet, but if they do happen, we've got to trust that we can fight against those things.
But historically, Doris Kearns Goodwin, when people have chosen to rise up, which does not include tweeting, it includes doing something historically or whatever the equivalent of tweeting was, it seems to me as a non-historian that there was always a leader ready to capture that moment and lead. Of all the examples you've written about and are aware of where we have moved from what at least some consider the depths to finally see daylight again, has there not been somebody who captured the moment and helped lead that thing?
That's an excellent point, and I think that's right. In fact, sometimes I think the most echo for today's situation economically is the Industrial Revolution at the turn of the 20th century, and Teddy Roosevelt was there. What happened, like our time, the Industrial Revolution had shaken up the economy. People were seeing for the first time a gap between the rich and the poor. There was a feeling of inequality. People in this country didn't like the people in the city. Teddy Roosevelt warned that democracy would be in peril if people in different states, regions, and parties began viewing each other as the other, and that's what was happening. There was also a nostalgia for another way of life before all this changed, telephones and telegraphs, and that's the nostalgia I think people felt toward a pre-COVID time with Trump. When he said the economy was great before me, he's thinking about that year or so before COVID hit. And COVID was devastating all of us, and we haven't even figured it out yet. So people thought, that's what I want to go back to pre-COVID. People in the 20th century, as it was turning around, wanted to go back to an earlier, farmer place. And then somehow Teddy Roosevelt fought for moving forward. And he was a fighting spirit. I'll fight those big companies. I'm going to protect you. I'm going to get workers compensation. I'm going to get minimum wage. I'm going to get maximum amount. And they felt we've got a guy on our side. Yes, somebody like that has to emerge. But who knows who will emerge right now? Who will be the leader of the Democratic Party? It's still to be determined.
We're talking to Doris Kearns Goodwin, needless to say.
You know, one of the things I don't understand, though, when you look at what Americans say they want to get more affordable health care. They want some kind of reasonable gun control. They want to get more tax cuts for the middle class as opposed to millionaires and billionaires and corporations that Trump mainly helped out last time. They're concerned about the climate. All these things are child care, help with child. These are all things that the Democrats want and that Republicans have stymied in Congress. So that's what I don't get, that disconnect, because Democrats may have botched this on many fronts, and she didn't separate herself from Biden, and the economy's bad for lots of people. But what makes people think that he's going to fix that? That's what the part I don't get.
Yes, somehow a group of people have felt he's on their side. I mean, that's what FDR said. The most important thing is an emotional connection, that someone's on your side. I think there's no question rationally exactly what you're saying is true, but somehow people haven't been made to feel by the Democrats that these are not just individual programs that they're willing, that they have an overarching philosophy about what government's role is. I don't know that they really made a narrative. Biden accomplished a lot of things, but he never changed people's feelings that government has a positive role to play and that it's not going to overreach, because people felt it was some overreaching. That's been the debate all along. What is the role of government? I mean, with LBJ, government was in there to really help people. Civil rights, voting rights, Medicare, aid to education, NPR, PBS, all of that stuff happened. And then there was a backlash. And then you have Reagan saying government's the problem, not the solution. Then you have Clinton coming along perfectly in the middle saying, it's both the solution and the problem, and I'm going to be a centrist. That's what we need, probably.
So, Doris Kearns Goodwin, here's an excellent, at least in my estimation, question for you from Paul from Braintree. It's a text, and it's picking up on your with malice toward none, with charity at all. President Biden should call Trump's bluff before the end of his term. He should pardon Trump. He should follow Lincoln's second inaugural address, what you said a second ago. Then, thanks to Biden, Trump will have come in with a clean slate. What do you think about that as a strategy?
Oh boy, I'd really have to think about that. One of the things that Lincoln said is, better to remain silent and appear a fool than to speak up and remove all doubt. So before I answer something like that, I will have to think.
Okay, fair enough.
Let me ask you something about the government overreach. Did part of that have to do with cultural stuff? And what's your take on that Democrats were too involved in culture wars?
I think that's part of people feeling anxious about the country moving in different directions now with social media, with the internet, with cultural changes, that people feel anxious about it. And it seemed like Democrats weren't aware of how that anxiety should be talked to.
Yeah.
Even if you want people to understand, these are okay things. You don't have to worry about them. I mean, gradually, when gay rights came about, there was public sentiment that came on the side. They understood that. These are people we love. Why should they not love who they love? These changes take time to absorb in, and you've got to be able to communicate them well enough.
Yeah.
Doris Kearns Goodwin, Brian Stelter from CNN, formerly the New York Times, writes the Reliable Sources column, which I think is terrific on the media. He has a piece this morning. Let me read to you from it. Charlotte Klein's recent New York Magazine column quoted an anonymous TV executive that's getting recirculated this morning. The executive said, and here's a quote, "If half the country has decided that Trump is qualified to be president, that means they're not reading any of this media." And he means fact-based legacy media, not Fox News. And we've lost this audience completely. A Trump victory means mainstream media is dead in its current form. And the question is, what does it look like after? What's your reaction to that?
Well, I think one of the problems with mainstream media right now is what you mentioned earlier. If we're going to have a leader, leaders used to have the bully pulpit. Now millions of people have that bully pulpit with social media. When FDR would give a fireside chat, 8 out of 9 people would be listening on that radio. You could walk down the street on a hot Chicago night, Saul Bellow said, and you could look at the kitchen, look into the windows, and see them staring at their radio and hear his voice and keep walking and not miss a word because everybody was listening. You need that kind of capacity for a leader to communicate fact-based information that is not alternative narratives, and then people will absorb them. When you've got social media, you've got alternative narratives, you've got people arguing what are facts, it's much, much harder for the media to know where to go, and you've got divided media.
But we're not going to abolish social media, so how do we circumvent, how do we get around this problem?
I mean, these are the problems a huge problem of what do we do about regulating it? What do we do about cell phones in schools? What do we do about keeping kids from spending so much time in isolation, this is another problem of the generation right now. We don't have those same social places. De Tocqueville, good old Alexis de Tocqueville, remember him?
I do. I do.
And I knew him, actually. He was a
talked
great
about
guy.
the informed electorate.
I knew him, actually.
And he talked about the fact that what made America's democracy work was that we all joined clubs. We were out there in organizations. We're not doing that anymore. That's that famous book, Bowling Alone.
Oh, by Bob Putnam,
Yes.
one of
I
the
love
greats
that. And
ever.
That was the greatest title for a book.
I
But it's
agree.
a scary thing right now. Where do we go other than social media to meet with other people, to even now commiserate the people who are hurt for what happened? Should be with their friends, talking about it, and figuring out what do we do? How do we organize? How do we move forward? They can't just sit at home and feel sad. That right now it's the time for those people who feel that they've been hurt by this election to begin to figure out what do we do? What do we do?
But how do they manifest their dissatisfaction? I mean, their dissatisfaction was the dissatisfaction of a minority of the American people to the tune of, I think, roughly 5 million voters. How does one do that in 2024 other than by voting every couple of years?
Well, you can organize. You can start running for your for your school boards. You can start running in your local areas. I mean, maybe you're not going to have the national government, but I think more than ever we're going to need people to now believe in public service again. If we don't, if we leave the government to other people, then nobody who's going to be able to exercise their powers. Voting is the most important, but much more important even now is to just get active in your local area, and begin to. If you feel like they're not doing what you want them to do, you start doing something, you make a promise, and you see it met, and then you feel, I've done something, I can go the next step. People can't shy away.
Do you worry, though, about it, during the, I don't have as much optimism as you have in your body, and I don't have as much confidence that will emerge.
You have to.
Well, I know you do, but I worry that during the time that we're ginning this up and getting to the point, a lot of really horrible things, at least to me, could happen in this country. And we don't know. I was just looking at CNN. The House is still unresolved, but as of the moment, it looks like there could be a Republican House, where, as I said before, the Supreme Court, the Senate, the House, the White House, all controlled by the same party. That could be a tough go while we're getting our act together.
No question. No, I mean, that one of the reasons why when Roosevelt did his first inaugural, he said only a foolish optimist would deny the brutal realities of the moment. Mm-hmm. But the only thing we have to fear is help. There's no question there's a lot of brutal realities of this moment, but that doesn't mean that you don't act and you don't move forward. If you lose confidence and you become disenchanted with the process, then all those things will happen.
Are you as positive as you say you are, or have you convinced yourself that I have to be to get through this life? I mean that sincerely.
Actually, I think it goes together. If you convince yourself that things can be better and that we can take action and that we can move forward as we have every other time in our history. We've had a lot of tough times in our history. Look, in those early days of World War II, Hitler was all through Western Europe. Yeah. It looked like we were never going to win that war, and yet the Allies won the war. We don't know as a people now how this is all going to end, but it's up to us to write the next chapter of that history. And I guess it's maybe true that I want to appear optimistic, because then I tell myself I am, and then it's true, and then I act.
Okay. Well, I hate to be not optimistic for a second, but I've often thought, historians often call the last century the American century, right? And we've been running things for 150, 200 years, really, the big power all around the world. If this is the Roman Empire ended, the Ottoman Empire ended, all these great empires ended. If ours is a short time compared to those, but that this is we've had it. That's what I fear, is that the things. Our leadership in the world now, we know that Trump is not going to support Ukraine. He said, I don't think he's going to be very supportive of Gaza. So we're not going to be that great city on a hill, kind of light of the world kind of thing. I'm worried we could be over.
No, the foreign policy part is very worrisome. I mean, my daughter-in-law's from Ukraine, and her parents are here with us. He finally got to be here when he turned 60. You can leave Ukraine for a period of time, so they're living in my guest room.
Oh my goodness.
I see them every day. So this is no way do I underestimate this problem. I think it's really scary.
And the peace of NATO all these years too.
Absolutely. No, but then you have to just decide I don't know how you influence that, but I think there's going to be people who are even in that system of government we have. That's why containing the House may make a difference for the Ukraine and for the Democrats.
I hate to be optimistic, but on this one issue that I care a lot about too, and I hope people do here, Ukraine, this is one of the few areas where some Republicans in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, who and I would call the reviled Mitch McConnell, at least in my book, has stood up pretty strongly. I know he's not going to be the next Senate leader of the Republicans, but this may be an area, despite the unanimity of the Vance-Trump position on this, that it may be Republicans who join with Democrats to actually support this fight for freedom.
I think that may well be true. And that's what happened, in the 1950s when you had politics stopped at the party's edge, right? At the water's edge. And you did have a lot of Republicans as well as Democrats coming together on that.
So we read at 4 o'clock today, Kamala Harris is going to speak at Howard University, her alma mater. In the meantime, I'm reading from NBC News, she's working on her speech. She's going to call Trump. How hard are those calls that, particularly when you have I don't know if it's, well, there have been campaigns like this, when they're this vitriolic and this intense, when you got to make that phone call, even if it's only for a few seconds, what's that like for these people?
I think all of our empathy has to go out to, just think about that. You wake up that morning and you think you may well be the next president of the United States, and it's gone. And it's especially something like this was expected. And what's extraordinary about everybody except for Trump in 2020 was that they go with these gracious these, I've just got a few of them here. Just to
please.
Think about that. When Stevenson lost, he quoted Lincoln. They go back to other things. When Lincoln lost his first race in 1858 in the Senate, he said, "I'm glad I made this great race. This is important. Even though I lost, it gave me a hearing on the great issues of the day I could not have had. And I think I made some marks which will tell for civil liberty long after I'm gone. I feel like the boy who stubbed his toe. It hurts too bad to laugh, but I'm too big to cry." And then what happens when Stevenson loses to Eisenhower? He quotes Lincoln, "I feel like the boy who had stubbed my toe. It hurts too bad to laugh, too big to cry." But then the important thing is, like Humphrey, when he loses to Nixon, he said, "I have lost, but be of good cheer. If I've helped to move our cause forward, I feel rewarded. We've got a president-elect, and he's going to have our help." Then McGovern, when he loses in 1972, and even though it was big, he didn't realize it would ever be that big. When he was 90, he was asked, "When did you get over the loss?" "Who said I ever got over it?" he said. "The loss is an old wound that never healed. I still feel the sting, though I'm glad I made the attempt. I wanted to win for my supporters and the soldiers I wanted to bring home," et cetera, et cetera. And then Carter loses to Reagan, and what graciousness he has. He said, "It's the most difficult speech of my life. I promised you 4 years ago I would never lie to you, so I have to tell you, it hurts. It really hurts. But the people have made their choice, and I accept their decision. I now ask for the full measure of your support for the president-elect as he undertakes the presidency of the greatest nation on the earth." And then Bush Sr., when he lost to Bill Clinton, he later said to a friend, he said, who was devastated at being fired, "I know how you feel. I was fired by the American people." And it hurt.
That's
and it
great.
hurt. But you'll be okay. And then Gore lost to Bush, and obviously he said partisan feeling must yield to patriotism, going back to Stephen Douglas. They go back in history, which is great. Neither anticipated this. The Supreme Court has chosen. I strongly disagree, but I accept my responsibility. We close ranks when the contest is done. We put country before party. Now, the important thing is that she will do that, and we know she's going to do that. The one thing we've avoided by Trump winning is that possibility that he would not have accepted this peaceful transition of power. And my real worry was that if he didn't accept it the second time, that there would be a stake really in the heart of democracy. This kind of gracious statement that I expect she will make shows that democracy is still strong. There's a moment for democracy.
Okay, so
but she's the first one who's going to have to apologize to somebody who said her vice president's called her trash. He's called her the C word. This is Trump called her the S word. Said she had low IQ. All these horrible things about her. So she's really going to have to rise on the graciousness front, I suppose, to be gracious to him.
I think she will, because she's not being gracious to him for herself as a person.
Yeah.
She's being gracious to democracy, because democracy says when the loser loses, they accept that decision, and the transition of power goes forward. That is the most important thing. Old George Washington would be roaming around in his grave if he worried about that right now.
So you think we can still go on as a nation of laws with Donald Trump in the White House again?
We have to. Yes, we have to. And there will be, I know they say there aren't going to be any guardrails. The American citizens will be the guardrails. If they're not in, and maybe, just maybe, this may sound really crazily optimistic. I mean, after the assassination attempt, that first one on Trump's life, he said, it's made an impact on me. I'm now going to change. I'm going to try and unify the country. He said it last night as well. He went right back to his temperament in those other times. But once you win, he's more sober when he wins. He was sober at that at the RNC. And maybe now the victory will make some of that anger fade away. I don't know, if he's possibly able to control it.
Has anyone ever met with you for more than 10 minutes where they didn't feel better after the conversation?
Well, history makes us feel better. It's not me.
You're incredible.
History gives us perspective. It gives us hope. It gives us solace. That's why I love it. That's why we've got to get it back in our high schools. We've got to get kids reading about
Read
time,
that book.
especially young kids. They don't know a time now where leaders were able to bring the country together. If they can read about FDR and they can read about Teddy Roosevelt, they can read about Abraham Lincoln, they'll feel better because they'll know we've been through really hard times before and we came through them.
You're the best. Doris Kearns Goodwin. Nobody like you. Thanks so much for your time.
Doris Kearns Goodwin, of course, Pulitzer Prize-winning presidential historian, author of many great books, including An Unfinished Love Story, A Personal History of the 1960s, and Team of Rivals, The Political Genius of Abraham Lincoln. Juliette Kayyem, right after the noon news. You're listening to Boston Public Radio.
You're listening to Boston Public Radio with Jim Braude and Marjorie Egan. Just ahead, more smart conversation about what's going on in our community. That's right after an NPR news break, here on GBH News 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Cure Alzheimer's Fund, which supports vital scientific research into the causes of Alzheimer's disease, because research is the only path to a cure. Learn more at curealz.org. How big is the universe? What is it made of? Questions like these have inspired amazing discoveries that have transformed our understanding of the universe since the 1970s. Don't miss NOVA, Decoding the Universe, tonight at 9 on GBH2.
I'm Jim Braude.
And I'm Marjorie Egan.
And you and I are listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston.
Online at gbhnews.org.
GBH News with NPR, what matters to you. I'm Jim Braude, head of Hour 2, Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library. Former National Security official Harvard's Juliette Kayyem continues our coverage of Trump's decisive victory over Kamala Harris. How are world leaders reacting to the former president's return to power? What can we expect in terms of global stability? And how about potential violence at home? And can Juliette manage to embrace her motto of a few years ago? Pacing the rage.
Okay, I'm Marjorie Egan, and the lines are open. Were you surprised at what you saw when you woke up this morning? What's front of mind for you as you adjust to the reality that former President Donald Trump will be the president-elect and will soon return to the White House? And how state races here in Massachusetts have gone for you? All that ahead, Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Sources tell NPR Vice President Kamala Harris is set to call President-elect Donald Trump today to concede the race. As NPR's Deepa Shivaram reports, the election was called for Trump early this morning as the Republican topped the 270 electoral votes he needed to win the election.
There are still ballots being counted, but Harris's path to victory diminished rapidly overnight after Trump won the state of Pennsylvania and its 19 electoral votes. He surpassed the needed 270 electoral votes once the Associated Press called Wisconsin for Trump early this morning. Two sources familiar with the planning say Harris is calling Trump to concede, and she's delivering public remarks today. The sources spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss Harris's plans. Her watch party at her alma mater, Howard University, was prepped for Harris to speak last night, but she stayed at the vice president's residence watching results come in. Deepa Shivaram, NPR News.
President-elect Donald Trump delivered his victory speech in West Palm Beach, Florida. He calls it his historic comeback, noting he was elected the people's 45th and now 47th president. Trump referenced the 2 assassination attempts on his life during the campaign.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason. And that reason was to save our country and to restore America to greatness.
Trump prevailing also after a historic 2 impeachments, first time around, a series of court battles, and an unprecedented felony conviction. NPR's Mara Liasson looks at what could be in store under a second Trump presidency.
This is going to be, according to everything that he has said and promised, the most radical, profound change in American governance in our lifetimes. I think more than our lifetimes. I mean, he wants to do away with the professional civil service. He wants to do away with our alliances abroad. He wants to instead of dealing with climate change, he wants to drill, baby, drill. There are going to be a lot of really profound changes.
NPR's Mara Liasson. In his speech last night, Trump said, quote, "We're going to help our country heal." Well, one of the people he thanked was Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Trump's embraced some of Kennedy's controversial ideas on health, widely panned by scientists, including removal of fluoride from the country's water supply. In his speech this morning, Trump said Kennedy would, quote, "help make America healthy again." The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up more than 1,300 points, or more than 3%. From Washington, this is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. U.S. Representative Bill Keating coasted to a victory in yesterday's elections, holding on to his seat in the 9th Congressional District. Speaking from his campaign watch party, Keating pointed to the need to work to heal damage from this election.
I'm committed to digging in and really working to take this country, get over this division, find some areas where we can go forward, because it's important not just for all of us in the U.S., it's important internationally as well.
Keating beat his challenger, Republican Dan Sullivan, with 55% of the vote. The town of Canton has hired a national firm to audit its police department following the Karen Reed and Sander Birchmore cases. The request for the Canton audit came about after intense scrutiny on the police department following the deaths of Boston police officer John O'Keefe in January of 2022, and Birchmore, who federal officials say was murdered in her Canton apartment by a Stoughton cop. Five Stones Intelligence will be paid $198,000 to conduct an independent police audit, expected to be completed by April 30th, 2025. Five Stones is currently auditing the U.S. Capitol Police as well as the U.S. National Guard deployment during the riot in Washington, D.C. on January 6, 2021. In sports, the Celtics host the Golden State Warriors at the Garden tonight. Should be a good game, and the forecast mostly sunny, near 80 today, clear upper 50s overnight, sunny and 70 tomorrow, 76 in Boston right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Made in Cookware. Made in Cookware is crafted by chefs for use in restaurants and home kitchens around the world. Their cookware can be found at madeincookware.com. This is NPR.
Welcome back to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Thank you very much. We know it was a late night for lots of you, so if you come down to the Boston Public Library today, what better on a late night than a nice, great cup of coffee or tea, which is free on GBH.
Yay.
That's right. And I'll have free coffee here at the BPL. We thank you very much for coming down. Hello again, Jim.
And if you ask nicely, there'll be free scotch also. We're joined now. By the way, let me explain to you, if you just tuned in, we have a couple more guests. We're going to talk to Juliette Kayyem in a minute, Michael Curry at 1 o'clock. Other than our discussions with Juliette and Michael, the rest of the show is yours. We're going to take a lot of calls, a lot of texts. So be patient, and at the bottom of this hour, we'll get back to you at 877-301-8970. We're joined now at the library by Juliette Kayyem, former Assistant Secretary for Homeland Security under President Obama, faculty chair of the Homeland Security Program at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. Hello, Juliette.
Hello.
Hey.
Hello, everyone.
Hey.
Okay,
Hi.
Juliette. So you look very spry, and I think you just confessed to me that you didn't stay up until 2 o'clock in the morning like us foolish people did.
I did not.
But anyway, what was your reaction to what happened?
Oh, I mean, look, I'll be honest. Anyone who's listened to me for 5 minutes is not the result I wanted for the nation, not the result I wanted for my kids. There's going to be lots of blame. There's going to be lots of accounting. Is he just a phenomenon that we don't get? And was she a flawed candidate? Did Biden take too long? Was the messaging wrong? Look, all of that is going to come out. We've got a lot to learn. But my biggest takeaway is my primary job is I'm a mom, and I have two 20-somethings and a 19-year-old, and I need to believe that this very flawed nation is not broken for them. And I do implore all my girlfriends that they need to believe. Doris just said we learn from the history, and they need to believe in the future. That will be my takeaway. And so that is how I spent my morning. I've not been online. I've been talking to my kids and helping them process this. For anyone who has kids of any age, fear, anger, disappointment, confusion, all of those things we're going through. If you're, I hear from my friends with younger kids, and the girls wake up scared. I mean, we need to help them too.
One of the things, an area where you have expertise, where I have none, and where the American people don't seem to care very much, if exit polls are to believe, is foreign policy. And this is not just speculation based upon what Trump has said. The New York Times editorial, believe him when he says it. We know his antipathy to our allies and to NATO. We know that J.D. Vance in particular, his vice president, but also Trump himself, does not appear supportive of Ukraine's fight for freedom. We know he is infatuated with Putin, with Kim Jong-un, and all these kinds of things. And also he will not have the generals who he had the first round. How dangerous is the foreign policy we're about to encounter?
It's dangerous to the extent that the post-World War II structure will not survive his second term. So as I say, I don't know what comes in its place, but in terms of a sense of the United States as leading a post-World War II, essentially peace, at least as concerns nuclear war, will not be a reliable partner. Will someone else rise to the occasion? Hard to see who that would be. We are not alone in this country in experiencing a return to more authoritarian leadership. We are not alone in this country in our nativism. We are not alone in this country as compared to the world in our fears of immigrants and our anti-immigrant status. So we are becoming more like the world rather than a leader for a better world order. So I think Ukraine results in Russia essentially some détente or some peace that is probably not beneficial to Ukraine. I think Israel, given what happened in Israel yesterday with Netanyahu firing, his one guardrail, his defense person will continue to take us to the brink of some sort of larger Middle East conflict unless Israel voters, as we saw in the streets, do that. I think immigration, I think he doesn't know how to do a mass deportation, but I think that there will be lots of changes to asylum law, to interior enforcement that we will feel. And his checks are on this are still our democracy. I think Doris is right. It was good for people to hear this. We are still citizens. I think some of his checks will be the business community that won't like some of this stuff. Business community does not like global disruption. It does not like supply chain disruption, and it does not like losing unlawful immigrants who aren't going to do the jobs that need to get done for them to make money. So there are going to be some checks. I even heard RFK. There's going to be some walkbacks. They are for a variety of reasons. There are, one is going to be a midterm, but it is not going to be very easy for those who were hoping for a different result for the next couple of years.
We talked about Ukraine, and you touched on Gaza and the Palestinians. I want to talk about that just for a second. The first phone call of congratulations that, according to the reports this morning, that President-elect Donald Trump got was from Prime Minister Netanyahu. Yeah. I have operated under, this is total speculation, I haven't read it anywhere, that Netanyahu is such a fan of Donald Trump. Yeah. The poll that was taken last week showed the Israelis themselves supporting Trump over Harris by 66 to 17, that because Trump has promised I could fix Ukraine in a minute, I could fix the Middle East in a minute, is it preposterous to think that the gift that Netanyahu might give to his friend Donald Trump might be the ceasefire and the hostage return that should have happened ages ago?
Yeah, I mean, the reporting had been that they had been in communication that this will be this will be a win for Trump, a public a foreign policy win.
Even while he's not even before he's in office. Potentially as president-elect.
Yeah, potentially, yeah. I mean, Biden is, the next 2.5 months are going to be bizarre because you had a president who didn't run, but is in charge of the transition. You're going to have Harris, who's now, never going to be seen from again, and all the appointments and other things that he's going to make. But they're not. I mean, his team is also looking at the data, things like that, if the Republicans did a realignment with the Hispanic vote, that realignment is precarious. They're going to want to keep it. So they're, what their immigration stance is going to look like, we'll figure out. I don't think they're going to go for a national abortion ban because I think they saw what happened in the swing states. In fact, some of the theories of what happened in the swing states is that those referendums gave women an opportunity to protect their own reproductive rights, but then vote for Trump. And then the Democratic Party has to figure out what it is. I don't know what to say about her, right? Is he just a phenom in the way Obama was for us that you can't get unless you support him, right? Is he just, could anyone have beaten him? She raised money. She introduced herself to the nation. She came up with policies. She positioned herself against him, and she got killed. I can't explain it yet. I can't.
We're talking to Juliette Kayyem.
Let me ask you, we talked a lot about violence with you. That
Yes.
if he had lost, the fears of the Proud Boys coming back. We also talked with you about one of the inhibitions of violence at the Capitol anyway was all the prosecutions of the January 6th people that attacked the Capitol and left police officers dead in their wake and many dozens injured. Is there going to be violence? Is there more of an okay for violence now? And what happens if he releases all these people that he says he's going to, that were incarcerated for January 6th?
Yeah, so that could very well likely happen. Again, we don't know, the bravado versus the governance. We're just not sure how it's going to play out. Look, the most important thing is he's protected himself. I mean, in one night, he became president. He protected himself from any criminal exposure, and he became like a multi-billionaire again because of what happened with his stock. So, it was a good night for Donald Trump. And I only say that jokingly.
Tesla stock went way up too, by the way, not surprisingly.
I mean, it is, and so there's but disruption does not, the market doesn't love a lot of disruption. So part of this is going to be, where does he, the violence is not good for this. So I was wrong. I'm willing to admit that, as were many people. But I always thought that the best case scenario for violence in our country was a decisive win. I assumed it was going to be her, right? I bought into it, and my apologies. I was looking in the wrong direction. But his decisive win, his near wins. I'm not closer wins in New Jersey and Virginia. I mean, in New York, the Bronx.
The Bronx.
So you're.
We should be clear. He didn't win New York, but he had
no.
13% more votes for Trump than the prior campaign.
So that decisiveness will probably breed greater safety. He didn't win it by judicial fiat. He didn't win it by lots of stuff. Now, look, I want to just put put a marker down. The Russians threw out a lot of bomb threats in large areas. Now, they were ready. It's a lot of work I've been doing the last couple months. You know, they were ready to reopen or open for longer hours. There is no suspicion, you know, that anything that happened was of consequence. Though annoying and scary to have a foreign government, you know, doing that. So I think. Because she apparently will concede at 4, Biden will do the right thing, the transition will be peaceful. There will be disruptions and interruptions and all sorts of stuff. I think the decisiveness of it, it's very hard to say you've been cheated of something.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and that's like, you know, that is democracy. And the Democrats have to learn. You know, we have a lot of lessons to learn, and we can blame sexism and racism and horrible people and whatever. But, you know, if you go around the country, as I do, I spend a lot of time, that's not the America I experience. You know, he may be a unique phenomenon in the sense that people excuse all sorts of bad behavior of him. But, you know, the hatefulness and all the things that sort of have been excused about him is something that we have to learn from. Why was that appealing? And I have theories. I mean, one is I think there is massive social and technological disruption that is scaring Americans. White Americans, and you cannot build a coalition unless you learn to address it. And people are going to say the Democrats have to go more conservative. I think there's an argument they got to go more labor. They got to relate to working class people in a way that we've been unable to.
Well, so I think the fear and anger.
That's not, you know, that's day one,
the
right?
The fear and anger thing; those are very powerful emotions.
Yeah.
And I think there was a lot of that.
I think the fear. I mean, I think, you know, we look at it at the top line. We look at all the horrible people around him and whatever. But there's lots of people who voted to protect reproductive rights, who voted for other progressive candidates, who voted to legalize marijuana, who voted for things that you and I would view as progressive, who did not vote for her. And I think we delude ourselves to say it's just she was a woman. It's just because she's black. It's just because look, we've got a lot to learn, and that reckoning is on all of us.
We should say, by the way, that while 7 of the 10 we mentioned earlier abortion measures on the ballot passed, the percentage of white women in this country who voted for Donald Trump was exactly the same percentage who voted for him prior to the repeal.
52%.
Can we get back to law enforcement and the judiciary for a second? We should say, in the spirit of full disclosure, in your house you have a federal appellate judge. Two things. There appears there are going to be 52 Republican senators.
Yes.
The hope is for people who believe in a fair, competent judiciary that people like Susan Collins from Maine and Lisa Murkowski from Alaska will be holdouts on out-of-the-mainstream judges. But even if they are, math is one of my strong suits. Yeah. That's 50 votes. J.D. Vance breaks the tie, just like Kamala Harris used to break ties. So one, the potential for 4 years of Donald Trump to further fill the judiciary with the Eileen Cannons of the world is great. Number one. Number two, you have no idea. Associate Justice Sotomayor has not been well. We have no idea what's going to happen there. But
you'll get retirements of the conservatives. Certainly, Alito will go. I think Thomas may consider it too. And you'll get 40-year-old versions of them. Yeah.
So, but I want to talk to you. You said a minute ago. I don't think you meant this exactly. You said, you know, it makes the criminal things disappear. The federal criminal things clearly will disappear. I mean, Eileen Cannon dismissed the Mar-a-Lago thing. The situation around the insurrection, obviously he's going to instruct his attorney general, whoever it is, to dismiss that. There's a sentencing scheduled this month in New York City for his 30-some felonies. What do you do? Nancy Gertner, who'll be with us Friday, former federal judge, said, I'm putting words in her mouth, as much as it pained her, she didn't say that part, I'm saying that, observing her when we talked to her, that the right thing to do was to postpone the sentencing until after the election. So is the right thing to do for the judge in that case with 30-some felonies to say, I'm going to sentence you to X, and you don't have to serve it until you've served 4 years in the White House.
Absolutely.
Yikes.
Yeah, well, he better pack his bags because he could be the
Guys,
first one. That's
he won the popular vote.
Yeah.
We do not
5 million votes.
We do not let a single judge overrule the will of the people like that, and especially because there is an alternative, right? And
they were aware theoretically that he was convicted
that
of
judge,
felonies.
right? Exactly. I mean, it is. Look,
it's a tough call for Judge Merchant to sentence into anything serious when he's going to be the president for the next 4 years, and he's out, and he's got a DOJ that's going to allow him to do things.
I mean, it is.
Maybe Judge Merchant better be ready to pack
be
his
attorney
bags
general
or whatever.
No. And also, I mean, I think there are lessons to be learned. I used to say on the show, like, I love my lawyers on CNN, but if I heard another one of them say, this is the decisive moment, this is the moment, I was going to, walk off a cliff. Look, we focused on a legal strategy to in some ways to make ourselves politically acceptable, politically popular. And I think that doesn't work. And I also think we have to learn about how we campaign. I think the pictures all of us saw of the long lines at the colleges and the door knocking, and thank you all for going to New Hampshire and Pennsylvania and wherever you went. Campaigns are different now. And he owned something, right? He owned Twitter, obviously, but he owned the podcast, and he owned we've got to figure out how do we utilize technology and possibly run campaigns different. I don't want to say those door knocking was useless. I mean, obviously, it won some Senate seats. It did lots of important things. But I'm not sure that's the future. I'm not sure grassroots is the future of the Democratic Party. One is we got to figure out a coalition that can capture people who do not feel that the significant technological and social change they are not comfortable with it. And you can call it racism, you could call it it's a lot of those things, but it is something else. And it's a challenge, it's an opportunity. I'm going through every emotion. I vowed I would try to be optimistic.
You're going to be able to pace the rage one you told us during the first
I'm ready
term.
to pace it, you guys.
Are?
I am here. I got my white shoes on, everyone. I'm pacing it. I got my tennis shoes on.
You and Ron DeSantis. That's perfect.
I am.
It's funny to think, though. It was sad to think in a way. I remember when we finally learned that Biden won last time around in 2020.
Yeah.
Remember, you could hear the horns tooting, and you hear people cheering, and they waving
Downtown,
to each other
right
and stuff
here.
like that. I never thought that 4 years later
you would
have
do,
this guy back.
Yeah, we none of us. He is a singular phenomenon in a way that I think those of us who don't support him don't see, and he's a singular phenomenon in making, I think, people who are not all of those bad words that we're saying feel comfortable voting for him. I want to talk about the sexism. There's going to be a lot about whether the U.S. is ready for a female president. I get it. She did not run as a female president, so we're going to have to figure.
But she is a female. I think it's hard to deny.
It is. I think the thing for me on the sexism part is less about her and more just a fundamental shock that the sexual allegations, the broism, the sexual violations that he's known for, the talk, that people could dismiss that. That, to me, rather than they should vote for her to prove that they're not sexist, that is, for me, a very hard lane. That for me is, there's lots of Republicans that in the past that weren't like that and wouldn't vote, so for me then I have a daughter who's in her 20s. To say the world's your oyster right now, it's like
exactly.
It's like sexual predator is now president.
You know who
That's
said
hard.
that a bunch of years ago?
Who?
The woman who now supports Trump and is the governor-elect of New Hampshire, Kelly Ayotte, said I could never vote for Donald Trump. I couldn't look my daughter in the eye and do it, and she did. Julia Kayyem, wonderful to see you as always.
Okay,
Pace
everyone,
the rage.
we'll be back. We'll be back.
Very much.
Thank you all for coming in.
We have been speaking with Juliette
Juliette.
Kayyem, she's former Assistant Secretary of Homeland Security under Barack Obama, Faculty Chair of the Homeland Security Program at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. Up next, more of your texts and calls, reactions to the election. The number to call or text is 877-301-8970. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. broadcasting from the Boston Public Library and streaming on youtube.com/GBH News.
As more and more aspects of campus life become polarized, college presidents have been thrust into the spotlight.
It's more in the public eye than it used to be.
Presidents are on edge all the time.
It felt like my mouth was taped shut.
It's in the best of times like tap dancing on a surfboard.
I'm Kirk Carapezza. We discuss how the college presidency became a lightning rod in our country's culture war on our podcast, College Uncovered. Listen wherever you get podcasts.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Atlantic Design Center by Eldridge Lumber and Hardware, committed to helping you achieve your vision for a new kitchen or bathroom and guiding you from design to completion, with showrooms in York and Portland, Maine. AtlanticDesignCTR.com. And Car Financial Group, independent fiduciaries committed to guiding investors through the changing economy with wealth management, financial, and retirement planning services. Consultations can be scheduled at CARRFinancial.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marge Regan. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. As we've said, in the spirit of somethingism, if you come to the library today, and if you're here already, a cup of coffee or tea is on our colleagues, on us at GBH. We hope you partake in it. We're obviously talking about the results of the presidential election. We can talk about the Senate if you like, which is under Republican control. House will be under Republican control. The House is still undecided. We have failed to mention that the 5 ballot questions in Massachusetts were resolved. The auditor will have the power, subject to legal challenge, to audit the legislature. That's question 1. The graduation requirement of MCAS is now gone. Rideshare drivers will be able to unionize, question 3. Question 4 was defeated. That was the psychedelics question. And question 5, which would have raised the minimum wage for tip workers to $15 an hour, was also rejected by the voters. If you want to talk about them, it's fine. My guess is most of you want to talk about the guy who's going to be the next president of the United States.
Well, Amina's weighing in on a ballot question. She says, too bad we voted down psychedelics. Could really have used him over the next 4 years. And then we have a anonymous texter who says, can we move up Am I the A-hole Day and give it to the majority of American voters?
Can I say one thing about that before you go to the next thing? I want to echo part of what Juliet said. If you didn't watch John King's All Over the Map, there are clearly some Trump supporters who are way over the line, who are atrocious. The bulk of the Trump supporters who I saw John interview, you may not agree with them, you think they're misguided, are people who have the concerns you've been talking about for weeks, don't feel that the Democratic Party understands how tough their financial straits are.
Well, I was trying to read some humorous emails.
Sorry, go ahead.
You're stepping
go
all
ahead.
over,
I am.
stepping
You're right,
all over
Go
them.
ahead, fine.
Lucy from New Hampshire says, all I can say is I need to be surrounded by puppies and baby goats for the foreseeable future.
That's fine.
So there's a good one.
Baby goats crap all over the place,
they
in case
do?
you don't know.
I wouldn't know
I
myself.
do. Actually, you know this. My younger daughter, when she was 4, we took her to a place with baby goats. I tell you what she did. She ate it. She popped them right in there. Exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
John and Gardner, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Our number's 877-301-8970. Hey there.
Good afternoon, Jim. I think we all could have lived without hearing that one.
Thank you, John. You're probably right. What's up?
Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
You know, when I first got nervous, besides the fact that Joe should have got out much earlier, and I blame the people around him and his wife, but some of those same people are behind the scenes running this campaign. They kept a combination, unless I'm wrong, I don't want to screw up her name. Is it Mary Donnelly?
I don't know if she is, but go ahead. What did she do wrong?
Well, she was part of the Biden campaign, and then she switched over, and unless I'm mistaken, she's pretty much running the campaign.
So what do you think they got wrong? Forget the individuals who might be responsible, other than the candidate herself. I am one who thinks, with a couple of exceptions, for a 108 or 109-day campaign, she actually did a pretty stellar job. Where do you think she fell down, other than losing?
You guys, by the way, did you see the 2-minute ad on Football Sunday?
What was it?
It was the best ad she's
Her ad.
best ad she's done by a mile.
Yeah.
It put in some pro-Kamala stuff instead of all. I know it was get out the base election, but you got to put some more stuff in there about why she's the choice and not him. I also jotted down ID politics, explaining the economy and some of the issues, and that was the toughest nut to crack, and of course immigration. But I just think, Jim and Marjorie, some of the people behind the scenes that were part of Biden's team and maybe part of Kamala's team are just looking at the old way of doing politics, knocking on doors versus
that's exactly what
social media and stuff. So,
Hey, John, thanks for the call. As always, we appreciate talking to you.
Of course, every time I opened my phone, I had another text.
I was just
going to
say the same
Harris
thing.
Campaign.
Yeah,
It was like it was sort of endless.
Trump, by the way, I got a lot of Trump texts too. I mean, they were using social media a decent amount, not just texting,
Can you imagine
tweeting and that sort of stuff.
Being in a swing state like Pennsylvania or Michigan, you would have gone nuts with all
Well,
the
it happens
ads and all
during
the
primary
texts.
season when doing a New Hampshire primary because we're in the same market. We see those things there then too. 877-301-8970. It's worth mentioning. We said this earlier, but I think it's really important. The Latino vote, fastest growing part of the population in America. And by the way, Latinos comprise almost 100% of the population growth of Boston over the last 22 years. There was a 33-point swing in Latino voters for Biden versus Harris in the negative direction. And Latino men, I can't read my writing, preferred Trump by either 10 or 16 points over Kamala Harris, which is a real huge accomplishment by Donald Trump.
Well, we have been reprimanded many times not to consider the Latino vote as monolithic.
Yeah,
that
you're right.
There's a great deal of divergence in that vote, and the idea, and you've heard people who came to this country from South America, Central America years ago say that they don't consider the people that he was trashing to be them, that they were the good Latinos who had jobs and succeeded, and that maybe they had to wait in line to come here, and they resented those that were just coming over without waiting in line. So there was a lot of that, this idea that Latinos would all be supporting immigrants, obviously, or migrants that came here illegally was obviously proved to be not true. Let's go to Jackie in Marion. Hi, Jackie.
Hello, Jackie.
They were the good Latinos who had jobs.
Oops, Jackie, you got to turn down the radio, if you would, please.
We'll try it again. Jackie, hi.
So there was a lot of that, this idea that...
We got to put you on hold. Jackie, if you turn down your radio, we'll take another call and we'll come right back to you. How's that? But you got to have your radio down. 877-301-8970. Bill in Chelmsford. Hey.
Hi, Bill.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
We've talked before. I have 3 daughters. They're all in college. And a conversation I had with my oldest daughter this morning, I've been talking with them regularly, but she's very concerned and upset. The thing she's upset about most, which I found interesting from a perspective as a dad and also knowing women's issues and having 3 daughters, was not the importance of the abortion issue of women's rights or anything. But she said to me, Dad, she said, I'm sincerely concerned that they will take away our right to vote.
Well,
and that to me, when I heard Doris Kearns Goodwin talk about us standing up, we blame the people of Gaza for not standing up against Hamas. We blame the Lebanese for not standing against Hezbollah. But how do you stand up against someone that controls all the guns and the power? I mean, it's a tough thing.
Well, let me say, I think you were about to say it's not going to happen. The Republican Party attempted in this election to stop people from voting who they thought were going to vote for Kamala Harris. So I don't think there's going to be, well, who knows? There's going to be some widespread assault on the right to vote. But I think particular populations who Donald Trump feels are not sympathetic to his cause may have reason for concern. Bill, thank you for the call.
Well, the thing that really is, as I've said many times, I think is hard to understand is voting for someone who has been credibly accused of sexual assault multiple times in double digits and was found liable to have raped somebody. I mean, I find that hard. No matter who he was running against, that's the person you'd want to run the country. And there's a difference between kind of like private morality and...
Well, can I quote you back to you?
What?
You say this to me every time I say that. They don't believe it. They think E. Jean Carroll is lying. They think the 24, 25, 26 other women who I agree with you, who made a credible case. They're all lying.
Yeah, but I also think, and I hate to say this about my own sex, but when I used to be working as a reporter covering trials, lawyers would much prefer to have men on a jury in a rape case than women. Women historically are harder on other women than men, which is really kind of pathetic for my own sex. But there's always the thinking, well, she must have done something wrong, and I wouldn't be in this situation, and I would have prevented that, blah, blah, blah. And if you have 52% of white women voting for Trump, there's part of that in that vote.
Well, Juliette Kayyem was big enough to admit how she was wrong about it. Let me tell you what I was really wrong about, and I was taken to task by one of our favorite guests, Anand Girdadas, a couple of weeks ago. My position was, it is the responsibility of the media every single time Trump is mentioned to mention part of his resume, that he was found civilly liable for rape, that he had been convicted of X number of felonies, that he had a $500 million judgment, and on and on. And Anand's position to us on the radio was, everybody who supports Trump has already said, I'm okay with that. And everybody who's appalled by it is already with Harris. Move to the things that you say, Marjorie, say people care about. Show you connect. That's all you should talk about, that you connect with their fears and their financial pain. And obviously that wasn't done successfully.
Well, you do have to connect with their fears and financial pain, and I think Democrats have not been very good about that. On the other hand, I don't think that means that you want a person of this caliber in the White House.
He wasn't saying that. He wasn't saying that at all. He was saying the case has been made on that. People know that. Let's try Jackie one more time. You're in Marion. Hi, Jackie. Welcome.
Hi there. Sorry about that.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
I just have to say this, this morning I had this overwhelming feeling. I was so disappointed with the Democratic Party. I feel like he ran for way too long.
Joe Biden. You're talking about Biden.
Yes, Biden.
Okay,
and we weren't, the Democratic Party wasn't allowed to vote for who we wanted to run this election. And the president who's losing his mind chose our president to run, or the
Kamala
candidate, which doesn't make any sense.
He endorsed her. Yeah, you talk about Biden endorsing Kamala Harris and then the Democratic Party.
Right.
Listen, I'm with you, Jackie. I think, they were, Fox News, I can't stand Fox News, but Fox News kept running these videos of Biden, not walking well or tripping or looking like he was very feeble. And the Democrats said, that's not really fair. Remember he was over in Normandy and he was looking out in a different direction and all that kind of stuff. And there was obviously a cover up of that because lots of people knew that he was not up to the task. I think it was terrible that he said he was going to be a transitional president, and then decided he wasn't going to be the transitional president. And the Democrats, if he'd gotten out earlier, you could have had what you were talking about. You could have had a primary among other Democrats, which would have gotten a sense of which person was connecting more in those issues we talked about.
Do you think Donald Trump's up to the task, using the same criterion you're applying and Jackie is applying to Joe Biden? I don't mean his policies you disagree with, his cognitive ability, his ability to focus.
Jim, I thought Donald Trump was unhinged when he ran in 2016. I think he's a very disturbed person. I mean, people that talk about a malignant narcissist, I think he fits the definition. Plus the fact that you have all the people that work closest with him, as we've said a million times, all these generals, that he is dangerous and deranged. So no, I don't think he's up to the task, but I do think that the Democrats did make a big mistake, and I'm, like Jackie, angry. And I'm not even a Democrat, I'm an independent, but I'm angry at how they handled this.
Jackie, thank you. One last thing before we take a break, and we'll continue with your calls and your texts. I don't think I said this on the air. If I did, my apologies. I think I said it to you this morning. We were talking to Bill Kristol the other day, who is obviously a very conservative person, who's a leader of the Never Trumpers at the Bulwark. He wrote a piece saying he found the most persuasive argument against Trump to be all the people who had worked with Trump.
Right.
Mike Pence, all the cabinet members, the others, the generals who said that he doesn't have the temperament or skills to be president, or he's a fascist or whatever. Are you amazed that apparently had absolutely no...
Well, again, if you have people Googling, the most popular Google search is whether Joe Biden is still in the race.
Running.
I'm not sure people follow the news closely enough, or they're in news bubbles where that wasn't reported. And people like Joe Rogan, who have millions and millions and millions of men, most of them young, listening to them, those kind of people are swaying people much more, as we talked about in the media before with Doris Kearns Goodwin, than watching CNN. You know what I
Eric
mean?
from Hopedale, before he breaks, said, it's a good question. I think you can answer it. Is it possible to get every single vaccine in existence within the next 2 months?
Yeah, you better hurry up, because if RFK is the new Dr. Fauci, we don't know. I mean, he's not too big on childhood vaccine. I mean, I can't believe that. Those of us who are old enough to remember measles and mumps and chickenpox, you get pretty damn sick with those things. They can leave terrible scars in your body. Who wants that?
Were you up when Trump spoke last night?
No.
I was. And one of the most incredible moments was when he mentioned, I was half asleep, RFK Jr., and the crowd, this is a crowd of conservative Republican supporters of Donald Trump, start chanting, Bobby, Bobby, Bobby. I mean, is that an incredible turn of whatever? We got to take a break, Marjorie.
Okay, we got to take a break. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're going to take all your calls and texts at the top of the hour. Then we're going to speak to Michael Curry from the NAACP. He was a poll watcher out in Michigan. We're going to talk to him after the 1 o'clock news.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, poet Tracy K. Smith. She probes the meaning of life. She meditates on what happens to our souls when we die. She communes with the dead. She makes the personal profound. Her poems also scrutinize the paradox that is the American dream and the injustices that plague our nation. It all comes together in her memoir, To Free the Captives, a plea for the American soul. That's on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And Barrett Tree Service East. Their team of arborists and plant healthcare professionals provides sustainable management for the care of trees, plants, and lawns in the communities where they live and serve. Learn more at barretttreeeast.com. And the Huntington Theater with Sojourners. A young Nigerian couple arrives in Houston in 1978 to earn their degrees, but the unplanned events that occur will ripple across generations. Now through December 1st. huntingtontheater.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan, the day after, live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. And as we've said repeatedly, if you come on down, in addition to being, I think, with people you'd like to spend some time with on the day after, there's a cup of coffee or tea on GBH, which I think is a very nice decision by our bosses.
Listen to this. You and I are lucky, Jim. A lot of us are lucky. But listen to this from Julie from Quincy. As an illegal immigrant, my question is about the mass deportation and the fact that Massachusetts gave us driver's licenses. Will the licenses be taken back, and will Trump take the list of people on that list with no social security numbers as easy targets to deport? Julie, that's a really that's a tough one. I don't know.
By the way, the only
what's going to happen to the Dreamers? I don't know that either.
The only argument I've heard that is moderately compelling against mass deportation, as Juliet mentioned it, is that it's really hard and they probably don't know how to do it. And the second, and I think equally important thing, is big business, which obviously has a connection to both, depends on what part of big business, with both Trump and Vance, depends on these workers. That's not much of a solace, I think, for people who are scared about their future or their kids' future in this country. But let's hope that they can't pull that off. Michael in Belmont, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Thank you for calling. Hi.
Hey, thanks. Thanks, Jim and Marjorie. I love the show.
Thanks.
I called in about 2 weeks ago. I was talking about how I was frustrated about Harris. I was moving to the right, talking with Liz Cheney. I was kind of hoping you were right, that it was a brilliant idea. But I'm a former elected official. I used to be a member of the Democratic Party, very active ward chair.
Yep.
And I'm just kind of done with the Democratic Party. I mean, to me, my eyes at least, we've completely severed our connection with working class Americans. I mean, look, what is it? It's something like 40% of Americans can't raffle up $400.
Yeah,
if there's
close to half.
There's like $1 trillion in credit card debt. I mean, so that's the first reason I think she lost, is she never really distinguished herself from economic policies of Joe Biden. But beyond that, I mean, I just never laid out a clear policy agenda. You know, I'm not Joe Biden. You know, I'm not the orange evil man who was not convincing to a lot of Americans.
But, Michael, let me ask you.
I waited until 12 o'clock to put whiskey in my coffee.
But Michael, let me ask you what I always ask people about that. When you say, the working class is Democrats have lost them. What are the policies that you think Trump or voters thought Trump was going to do to fix those? Because the big tax cut he gave was mostly to very, very wealthy people, and he's still talking about giving one to wealthy people, where Biden was talking about no one making under $400,000 would get taxed. And he did do the prescription drugs, and he did strengthen Obamacare. So what, you know what I mean? What are the Trump policies that are going to help those situations?
I think what it boils down for me is that there's a good slice of people that voted for Trump that are just voting for him as for a populist.
For what?
They're really
as a populist.
As a populist.
Hey, Michael, we got to let you go. Not because it's not a fine phone call. It's a really bad connection. Call us again.
Vance.
Can I give an update on the House of Representatives?
Oh, my goodness.
Remember, the Senate is now will be in the control January of the Republicans, as is the White House, as is the Supreme Court. Theoretically, it's not partisan, but as is the Supreme Court. CNN just said, by the way, current split, I believe, I hope I'm right, is 220 to 212, meaning 4 votes need to be switched. The Democrats are leading in 5 races currently held by Republicans. The Republicans are leading, according to CNN, are leading in 3 races that are currently held by Democrats. So if those hold, it would be only a net change of 2 seats in the direction of the Democrats, which would not be enough to take away Republican control. So we potentially are very close to complete control of every branch of the federal government by the Republican Party of Donald Trump.
Yeah, I wonder what he's going to do about Obamacare.
Well, it's an interesting thing. I want to ask Michael Curry about that, since he's the head of the League of Community Health Centers. Mike Johnson, the current speaker, it's unclear if he'd be speaker even if the Republicans regained their majority there, originally said we're going to dump it, and then Trump said no, we're not. I'm paraphrasing. So Johnson backed off from that. I think the biggest problem is, what do they have to replace it? And they don't have anything, so I'm hopeful that they won't. But it hasn't been a target for a while, because, as you know, in a lot of red districts, people are really dependent upon the Affordable Care Act, but I just don't know.
Here's
a
good one. This is a text. To quote the movie Airplane, I picked the wrong week to give up sniffing glue.
Was that Leslie Nielsen? Was that who that was? Lloyd Bridges. John Parker, of course, knows.
Remember that? And his hair stood straight up from his head. Oh, my God. That's an old movie, but if you haven't seen that, that's a good one to take your mind off your troubles.
It is really low rent, but it is
riot.
Really funny. Charlotte and Gloucester, welcome, Charlotte. Good to talk to you again.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Perfectly.
Okay, great. I just wanted to talk about white women.
Yes.
And why, I'm sort of the opposite of Doris, because history also has some really hard lessons to teach us. And the origins of the American women's movement contains the seed of racism. And so Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who many kids are taught to revere, if they know who she is, departed from the mainstream women's movement when she heard that black men were going to get the vote. And she said, you're going to give Sambo the vote before white women. And the women's movement split. And why did it split? It split because of racism. And we haven't confronted that history. And until we do, I think we're going to have white women having this sort of seeded schism inside the movement. I don't know how else to say that.
Charlie, are you surprised that we mentioned 7 of the 10 ballot campaigns that were pro-choice prevailed out of 10. Were you surprised that abortion being on the ballot in so many places and the repeal of Dobbs led to such little change in women's vote in this country?
I have to say, I wish I was more surprised. I keep hoping that white women are going to budge. But I feel like we have a plague of history that until people understand the embedded racism inside the women's movement and women's issues, that we're in trouble.
So you're saying that white women didn't vote for Harris because she's black?
I'm saying that white women see themselves as allied with Trump. They see themselves as allied with white, powerful men. It's a history. Not all of us, obviously.
Yeah.
Well, they obviously do. I mean, look at the numbers.
Yeah.
And by the way, you know this probably, Charlotte. We mentioned before, at least exit polls that we saw this morning, the percentage of white women who voted for Donald Trump in 2024 is almost exactly the percentage of white women who voted for him in 2020 and 2016, which would suggest that the issues we talked about had no impact on moving them. Charlotte, that was an excellent call. Thank you for making it. Do it again, please.
What if the UPS driver wants to know if he can volunteer to be part of the mass deportation? I guess he's ready to go someplace else. He's had enough.
Well, you know, we heard a lot in 2016, particularly high-profile people, I'm leaving the country if Donald Trump is elected. I don't know how many of those people did that. I don't think many. I'm curious to see how concerned, how scared. I know a lot of people personally who I spoke to late last night and this morning who are very scared of the next 4 years.
I wonder, you know, for people like, we were just talking about Judge Marchand that sentencing him. I would be nervous if I was Judge Marchand to be sentencing Donald Trump. Liz Cheney, she's got to be pretty nervous.
I'd be nervous.
The people that have worked in the Trump press office prior to when he was, you know, when January 6th happened, that left and been very critical of him.
Stephanie Grisham.
Hutchinson, that young woman who got up and testified against him. All these people. I mean, I'm hoping that he's not serious about this retribution, but I don't know. Maybe he is. And of course, he's immune from whatever he does because the Supreme Court has said he's immune from whatever he does. So
that is still, in retrospect, really one of the most incredible things this court has ever done in a history of incredible things.
We have to root for the House, Jim, because it's all we're going to have left.
No, it's true. I mean,
if it goes to Republicans, it's going to be the Supreme Court, the President, the Senate, and the House. Oh my God!
And by the way, people, you know, a lot of people talk about the 60-vote threshold in the Senate. It was gotten rid of, I think, by the Democrats originally, in terms of district court judges in the federal system. Obviously, the Republicans included the Supreme Court on that. You only need 50 votes plus one. And as I said, there are 52 Republicans. And there's a vice president who's a Republican who can break a tie if two Republicans don't go along. So the judiciary is going to be an issue.
Here's what Matthew from Westboro, who's saying the very similar thing we've heard. You can't keep repeating Trump's shortcomings. Doesn't matter to people not being able to buy a house, inflation, immigration, immigrants being forced to pay the housing of people they don't want to support, pay for the future kids, etc. And I get it, but again, I would like Matthew to tell me, why do you think Trump is going to do something about it? He's going to probably do something about immigration, but the rest of the things.
Well, can I speak to Matthew for a second?
What?
I mean this respectfully. You're right that it doesn't matter. But I sort of think as a moral person, Matthew, which I'm assuming you are, if you care about the E. Jean Carrolls of the world, should you be silent about what was found to have been done to her by Donald Trump and all the other I mean, I repeat, I know it's a lost cause if you care about constitutional government. Donald Trump attempted to overthrow the government of the United States. Now, a majority of people in this country are obviously fine with that, as evidenced by the vote. But the fact that they're fine with it does not mean that it doesn't require mention. Caden in Sudbury, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Thank you for calling. Hi.
Hi, Jim and Marjorie.
Hi.
I'm a non-binary person, Democratic voter in Sudbury.
Yep.
Last week, I texted my Republican brother in Pennsylvania, and I asked him what his motivation was for voting for Trump, and I expected his answer to be the economy. And the very first answer he gave me was health care for transgender youth. And I was really just blown away. And it speaks to me about the fear campaign that Trump ran. And I think I'm just surprised by how many people were motivated by that.
Well, by the way, a huge part of the campaign was a campaign against what I would argue the most vulnerable people in our society is trans people, particularly young trans people. And it obviously worked, and there were tons and tons of commercials directed at what was allegedly Harris's policy about providing health care, gender-affirming care to people who are incarcerated. And she made the point, actually, that policy was begun under Donald Trump, but apparently that set of facts never got anywhere. Caden, thank you. It's pretty hard in those intra-family things. An anonymous texter sent a really nice note about you, which I want to read.
Yeah, I saw
it's
that.
It's really nice. Hello, Marjorie. I am proud of you today. You showed up, you were not in tears, and you appear to be sober, which is really...
That's right.
She does appear,
usually,
to me, she appears to be sober.
I have a couple of cocktails before I show up to work, but today I decided
That's why you're so good
lay
most
off
days.
the Manhattans before I came to work, yeah.
Mary
from Boston,
Mary,
thank
hi.
you.
Hi.
Hi. it's hard for me to articulate all of the concerns that I have about this election. But I am certainly not blaming the Democratic Party or Harris for this loss, because this loss is because of people who voted for him, knowing what he is and knowing what's going to happen. I think there was some level of misogyny. There was some level of greed. Somebody said to me recently, why should she give all this money to people who are first-time home buyers? I didn't get that help.
Yeah.
I also think, I think Ukraine is for sale, Taiwan is for sale, because everything is transactional. So, I'm actually signing off on politics.
What does that mean?
It means I'm just not going to get emotional about it anymore.
Well, let me tell you, my friend, that's a lot easier said than done. If you're a caring human being, which based on your first 30 seconds on the phone you appear to be, I would say don't count on your ability to live up to your own pledge to yourself. But Mary, thank you very much for the call.
I think a lot of people are going to take a break from politics at this particular juncture. I mean, I think the call that said before how he had the conversation with his daughter who was so upset. There are a lot of young women. I've got 2 of my 3 kids are young women.
I have 2 out of 2.
Exactly. They are extremely upset about this because they see that this was someone that was going to take away their reproductive freedoms and is a misogynist, I think it's fair to say, and has also done terrible things to women and talks about grabbing them by the you-know-what. And I think it's very hard if you're, a 20-year-old young woman to reconcile.
20 seconds, quickly. You said you're not worried about a national abortion ban if they control every branch of government. They got away with repealing Roe v. Wade and won everything. Why would they worry about taking another step? Because
in the 10 states where it was on the ballot, it passed in 7 places, and passed in places like Missouri.
People were pro Roe v. Wade, and they decided it was okay to repeal it.
Because it's going to cost them votes, Jim. They were able to codify abortion rights in many of these states and still vote for Republicans.
The repeal of Roe didn't cost them enough votes, is what I'm saying. And so I think there's a lesson.
Because I think they didn't think Trump was really into it. I think they think Trump realized he made a mistake, which he basically has said since he saw the reaction to it. I mean, he could seduce his first term by the evangelicals, and then he's a smart enough politician to learn it was a mistake. Anyway, we're going to talk with Michael Curry right after the 1 o'clock news. You're listening to Boston Public Radio.
Then more of your calls.
Each day, GBH brings you coverage on a wide range of information so you can stay informed and engaged in our local community. We depend on listener contributions to keep this quality reporting going. Support your listening by pitching in at gbhnews.org.
Support for GBH comes from you. And MIT Federal Credit Union, with memberships open to the general public and serving the financial needs of their members through an array of financial services. To become a member, you can visit mitfcu.org, federally insured by NCUA. And the Massachusetts Office of Travel and Tourism. Visitors can celebrate this Thanksgiving season by discovering secrets of the South Shore with Sea Plymouth. Learn more at seaplymouth.com/secrets.
Trusted. Local. News. You're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR. What matters to you.
I'm Jim Browdy, head on Hour 3 of Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library. We'll start the 1 o'clock hour with Michael Curry, CEO of the Mass League of Community Health Centers and a national NAACP board member who spent yesterday as a poll monitor in Michigan. A lot of people today are weighing in on what last night's results tell us about the shortcomings of Democrats' relationships with voters of color. We'll hear what Michael thinks, plus what Trump's win means for affordable health care.
I'm Marjorie Egan, and to end the show, we will return to you with your calls and texts at 877-301-8970. If you're finding yourself with unaired feelings of unprocessed emotions from yesterday's election, excitement, frustration, surprise, disillusionment, you have come to the right place. Call or text Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Voters across the country are processing President-elect Donald Trump's election year comeback from years of political and legal upheaval. He defeated Vice President Kamala Harris, who replaced President Biden at the top of the Democratic ticket just a few months ago. Their race was extremely close, but key states, including Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Georgia, and North Carolina, helped get Trump past the 270 electoral votes he needed to win. And the Associated Press is now reporting that Trump won Michigan as well. A source tells NPR that Harris plans to reach out to Trump today. She plans to deliver her concession speech publicly at 4 p.m. Eastern from her alma mater, Howard University. NPR's Domenico Montanaro looks at the areas where Trump made inroads.
Democrats have traditionally gotten about 2/3 of Latino voters in the last 4 presidential elections, but this time around, only 53% sided with Harris, and clearly that was enough to help Trump add to his coalition of white voters without college degrees who broke for him in wide margins as well, because these voters were all concerned about the economy.
Republicans have retaken control of the Senate after flipping seats in West Virginia and Ohio. On CNN, Republican Senator Marco Rubio of Florida was asked if the Senate would confirm Robert F. Kennedy Jr., whose ideas on vaccine restrictions, the removal of fluoride from the U.S. water supply, and other ideas have been widely panned in the scientific community.
We have to understand the job of anybody that President-elect Trump puts in place. The job of those people is not to be a check on Donald Trump or to control him. It is to help carry out what the American people have sent them there to do.
The makeup of the U.S. House, where the GOP currently has a majority, is still up in the air. Dozens of district races are still too close to call. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called President-elect Trump's win a, quote, powerful recommitment to the great alliance between Israel and America. But, as NPR's Kat Lonsdorf tells us, Palestinians in Gaza are wary of what this win means for them.
NPR's producer Anas Baba spoke with people in a market in central Gaza about the election results. I'm frustrated, 22-year-old Laura Auda says, because for sure things are going to go from bad to worse. We are in a terrible situation because of Trump's victory, Yusuf Al-Akha says, noting that last time Trump was president, he moved the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem in solidarity with Israel. Mohammed Al-Hassani says he doesn't think the war will stop, even though Trump has said he wants a ceasefire. Just the opposite. I think it will increase, he says. The relationship between Trump and Netanyahu is strong. Kat Lonsdorf, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
From Washington, this is NPR News.
Good afternoon. I'm Marilyn Scherer with the latest from the GBH newsroom in Boston. It appears 2 women of color, both daughters of Haitian immigrants, will hold a seat on the Governor's Council, an elected panel that vets and confirms new judges. Probation officer Tamisha Civil declared victory in District 2 over retired Judge Francis Crimmins. The Associated Press called that race at 10:30 this morning. And former City Councilor Eunice Ziegler of Methuen leads her opponent Ann Manning Martin of Peabody by nearly 18,000 votes, with 72 precincts reporting. Meanwhile, the results of the 5 ballot questions in Massachusetts are finalized. Question 1, voters said yes to allow a state audit of the legislature. Question 2, the MCAS test was eliminated as a standard graduation requirement. Question 3, rideshare drivers have the option to unionize. Question 4, psychedelic substances like mushrooms remain illegal in the state. And question 5, increasing the state's tipped wage was defeated. There is a red flag warning in Massachusetts today for very dry and windy conditions, which puts the state at high risk for brush and wildfires. Massachusetts generally sees about 20 brush fires during the month of November, but according to the National Weather Service, close to 50 fires have been reported. The public is asked to refrain from any outdoor activities that involve open flames, sparks, embers, or heat sources. And the Celtics tonight will host the Golden State Warriors at the Garden. The weather forecast mostly sunny and warm, with a feeling of summer today, high near 80 degrees. Clear and mild tonight with the temperature in the upper 50s, sunny and 70 tomorrow, and sunny in the 60s on Friday. It's 78 degrees in Boston. I'm Marilyn Scherer, GBH News 89.7.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. Fisher is committed to helping clients stay on track to reach their financial goals and enjoy a comfortable retirement. FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss.
Eastern Browdy, I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library, streaming on youtube.com/GBH News. And because this is a very emotional day for lots of people, if you come down here to the Boston Public Library today, you are welcome to a free cup of coffee or tea on the GBH tab. Hello again, Jim.
Hey there, Marjorie. In about 20 minutes, we're going to take your calls yet again for the rest of the show, as promised. But in the interim, we very much wanted to talk to Michael Curry. Michael's joining us. He's the president and CEO of the Mass League of Community Health Centers. He's also a member of the National NAACP Board of Directors, where he chairs the board's Advocacy and Policy Committee. He just got back from doing some election work in Michigan, which we'll talk to him about. Michael, welcome. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, Michael, so what'd you think? What was your reaction? What happened?
I'm not even sure I can tell you what I think. I'm still processing it myself. One is, as much as I'm disturbed and disappointed in our democracy, I'm heartened by what I saw when I was in Michigan. The fact that I was there to do election protection and there were issues all across Michigan, but that I saw people who had voted for the first time come out, that I saw communities working together to get their communities out. The numbers don't really reflect how much was happening on the ground across the country to get people to trust democracy again. So we tend to think of those people who showed up on January 6th as people who've had the issue with democracy, when I would argue that the people who truly had an issue with democracy is those who had to face slavery and Jim Crow and black codes and segregation. And they're the ones, and particularly some of those black men that people are talking about in those final days, that said, you know what, why vote for either one of them, right? They tell us what they will do, then they don't do it, and they mass incarcerate us, they shoot us on the street, they don't invest in our communities, go down the list in our businesses, and yet effort was put in to really start to get them to re-engage with our system. So I think there's work to be done, but that was encouraging.
How much, I would say most of the discussion today, both with listeners and guests, including Doris Kearns Goodwin, I surely don't want to speak for her, but I think I'll be fair, and you tell me if I'm not, Marjorie, is that while she said race and gender, of course, had some impact, it's primarily a failure to connect with voters over their economic concerns and those sort of things. Do you buy that? I mean, if there was a white guy who ran with the exact same policies, exact same campaign as Kamala Harris, would he have done any better?
No. I actually, let me change that. I think that Biden was a choice in the last election for a reason. I don't think, and I've said this on this show, I don't think Biden was everyone's choice to run for president. We needed a white guy who would make America feel comfortable with him being president. I think that was a choice that the Democratic Party made. But I think it had an expiration date, that the reality was, one, his decline, two, visible decline. And then two, I think we had hoped that America was ready, like they were with Obama, or and maybe here in Massachusetts with Deval Patrick, to then embrace a woman of color. And I think, the way I would sum up this election is this. What I think is masterful that Donald Trump did, and I don't think the Republican Party could have done this, I think Donald Trump did it, which is Donald Trump is excellent in playing on our prejudices. So he says, well, she's a woman. So do you trust her being in the room with Putin? Because you need to trust me. Oh, is she really black? Because I know you black people don't think that she's really black, right? Or those immigrants. And this is all playbook from, the Southern strategy or Hitler 1930s, is playing into people's fears and their wanting to be better than, the tribalism part of it. And what he untapped in America, again, is this notion that you can reach a lot of people and people can vote against their own interests, right? So if you're many of those people who voted for Donald Trump, I think if we sat down and looked at all their interests, do they care about climate change, right? Not just the eggs, the price of their eggs or the price of their gas, but you care about climate change. If you're a woman, do you care about your right to choose? If we went down and tracked all of the interests that they have, I think their choice would have been different. But when you play into people's fears, you draw on that one or two things. So economic and immigrants, they're coming across the border. We got to stop them from coming across the border. I will say this last thing on this. I remind people all the time, particularly as I think about African-American immigrants who may have a leaning towards Trump, or Irish immigrants, or Polish immigrants. or the 6 million black folks who moved up from the South during the Great Migration. All of the things we're saying about the southern border, they said about you. They said about you Polish when you came to this country. They said about you Irish when you came after potato famine. There's going to be crime, drugs. They're not clean. They're not as intelligent. And we fell into the same playbook and allowed this man to weaponize it.
Well, you mentioned playing to fear and how successful it was for him. I would argue that Kamala Harris attempted in a different way to play to fear as well. She, when asked the question the other day, do you believe he's a fascist? After the generals came out, said in one word, the answer was yes. She spent a huge amount of the final weeks of her campaign focused on the threat to democracy and the fear that a lot of people had about a guy who they believed didn't believe in democracy. Why did his work and hers didn't?
Ultimately, it's almost like I know you are, but what am I, right? I think we got to this place where he was so negative, right? He attacked every Republican candidate that ran against him. He attacked every Democrat that even if you try to be tough, even if you try to come back with a sarcastic comment or with a negative criticism or give him a name, you were always at a deficit. You could never keep up with him. I always said it's like the bully in the class won, right? Yeah. Think about the bully in the class. And some of us were afraid of the bully, and many others were drawn to the bully because there was something about the bully we liked, something about the power of the bully that we were drawn to. And in fact, as long as the bully liked us, we were good.
That's right.
So the reality is, Kamala, there was times that I would say, okay, you need to hit him tougher than that. But I know that no matter what she would have done, it's the gaslighting of it all, right? Is that ultimately she couldn't have done it because they would have turned it around and said, see, she called him a name. But yet his whole profile is name calling. It's the serial lying. He is a true fascist, in the true definition of the word. But yet he turned the definition around and called other people stupid and fascist. It's just as amazing that we allowed him to do it. But it just reminds me that if you look at the world history, we're all followers. And if somebody taps into our own prejudice, we can be made to almost do anything.
So, Michael Curry, the NAACP, and as I say, you serve on the national board, is a nonpartisan organization, but I think it's safe to say that individual members probably overwhelmingly were supportive of the candidate who lost. When you have your next meeting, whenever it is, and I assume topic one on the agenda is to sort of get the ship afloat yet again, the ship that you would like to see sail, what are you going to say at that meeting? What are the things that you think most important to right the ship?
Well, one is we've been here before, right? We've been here many times, right? We were here after 1963 and 1964, Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act, right? There was the backlash with Nixon a few years later, and that Southern strategy I just talked about, which is to sort of mobilize the white grievance across the South and really shore up the states in the southern parts of the country. We were here after Reconstruction, and I've mentioned that before when I was here. Mm-hmm. Like we thought we had, slavery ended, and we have, 40 acres and a mule, and Homestead Act, and then there was a backlash. So I think for many of us that do this work, it's no surprise. There's always a backlash to progress. This is a backlash to George Floyd. It's a backlash to all of that health equity, DEI conversation over the last 4 or 5 years. Even those who thought they were comfortable weren't comfortable with that conversation and walked into the polls and voted what I would argue is the wrong way for even their own interests. So I think, there'll be a call tonight, a national call with NAACP members. We are nonpartisan, but of course, I'm speaking as an individual. When I line up voting rights, when I line up Civil Rights Act, when I line up climate change, true science, vaccines work and saves lives, when I line up all the issues I care about, public health, I'm terrified. Someone said to me today, they said, a good friend of mine said, well, things go on. I think was the phrase that they used. And I said, things go on, that's true. But the ripple effect of this decision will last for generations. Whoever becomes the head of Health and Human Services and the CDC and FDA, whoever leads housing and education and the next Supreme Court seats over the next 4 years, this has a generational impact that folks may not even realize. And I'll say this last thing, is I woke up this morning, actually I didn't sleep but an hour, because I think most of us didn't sleep for an hour. What was on my mind, I'm going to say this because I don't know why it was on my mind, but when the phrase of Jesus Christ, when he said, forgive them, they know not what they do, was on my mind. Because I don't think they know what they just did. And I think history will reflect back that those voters, the millions of voters who voted for Trump, will reflect back and say, well, we knew he was lying. We knew he was corrupt. But we just wanted something different. And there's a price you pay for that. And we'll pay for that for generations to come.
When you say that, generations to come, and the FDA and the HHS and all that, what do you mean? What are you talking about?
Well, one is we know we have science, and there's a science denial that comes out of this president and those who he purports to believe in and put forward. We saw that during COVID, right? Some of the crazy stuff that was said during COVID. And now as he's looking at putting a man in charge of the Health and Human Services. Now, not that will happen, but if it does happen, he said, I was going to make him real important in healthcare. I know that the experts who've been doing this work for years are terrified of what that means. You know, whether it's polio or measles or COVID, you know, settled science is that vaccines have saved lives. And to have someone who comes in with crazy notions and dispels the settled science is terrifying.
You're talking about RFK
I'm talking about RFK.
You know, speaking of RFK Jr., for whatever it's worth, a lot of people who were convinced that Trump was going to win, but deeply concerned about him being sort of the czar of public health, said, well, it's not that bad because the position is not so poorly defined and he could never get confirmed in the Senate, which an HHS head would have to be. He could get confirmed in the Senate now. There may be 53. I was just looking. It appears that the Democratic incumbent in Pennsylvania may lose as well, which I think would get them up to 53. I may be off by one, but enough that even with a couple of holdouts like the Collinses potentially or from Maine, there's a decent chance he could be put in charge of that.
All three branches of government.
And it's the biggest, well, I guess it's the biggest, is it not the biggest part of government? I think it is.
Agencies, yes.
So Margie and I were talking, I don't know if we did this on the air because the day's been so long. Mike Johnson, the current speaker, and he may be speaker again, it's unclear what the Republicans, what the ultimate outcome of the House is going to be, said a couple of weeks ago, we're going to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, and then realized that was not what Trump was saying, so you have to pretend like he didn't mean that. And then the next day he said, I didn't mean that, or whatever he said. And in fact, I think he had originally said that in a private meeting, and I think a CNN reporter, he said, I never said it, and then they play for him. Of course, he said exactly those words. How worried are you about the fate of the Affordable Care Act if there's a Republican House?
Oh, very worried. I mean, they've tried on many occasions to repeal the Affordable Care Act. And the reality is the Affordable Care Act is popular. Obamacare is not popular.
Exactly.
The contradiction of that.
Can I just tell a quick story before you go ahead? And that Jimmy Kimmel, I don't know if he does it anymore, used to send reporters out to Hollywood Boulevard. And when the Affordable Care Act, I don't know if you ever saw this, just was becoming, I think it just become law. He asked people which they preferred, the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare, which of course are the exact same thing. Yeah. And you nailed it. Everybody loved the Affordable Care Act, and almost everybody hated Obamacare. Obamacare, that's a problem. But the Affordable Care Act, that is...
And what does that say, though? Right? What does that say about sort of the backlash to the Obama years and, of course, how the GOP weaponized that against Obama? However, it's popular, Affordable Care Act.
Including in red districts.
Including in red districts. So think about this, talking about voting against your own interests. Before the Affordable Care Act, over 40 million people didn't have health insurance.
That's right.
That meant for a large swath of this country, if you got sick or you needed a medication, you didn't go to the emergency room because it was too much money. You didn't go buy that medication even if the doctor prescribed it because you didn't have a copay and co-insurance. You had to pay the whole freight for that drug. And then all of a sudden the Affordable Care Act, and of course it wasn't perfect, like Medicare and Medicaid weren't perfect when they came out. And the reality is they're voting against their own interests. Now it's down to, I think, 20 million people who don't have insurance. So how do you not recognize something that quite frankly saves your life? That you got now a primary care provider and the emergency room is not your doctor, hopefully. That you now have a primary care doctor, you can go get your breast exam or your prostate exam or your mental health or your substance use disorder, or your teeth or your eyes. And now you say, okay, we're going to repeal it. But nobody's been able to tell you what they're going to replace it with. That should be troubling to any voter, any American, no matter what party you are. But again, this is not about voting your interests. It's about voting your gut. And voting your interest, I mean, your feelings. And if your feelings, I like his brashness. I like the fact that he speaks truth to power. I like that he swears or he's inappropriate. And he talks about the economy, although his administration didn't necessarily have all those wins. But you're not checking the facts. You decide, okay, well, I'm just going in and I'm going to vote for him. That should be troubling. But again, we've unleashed this thing now, which is the Trump presidency. Can we ever put that back in a box? Or is now the road to winning always lying? Always picking grievances and who's coming to get you and take your jobs and your life and threatening. That's now, I think, the weapon that we now know works.
By the way, for those who are listening to Michael on this issue, we discussed this yesterday, and saying, well, this kind of lying only really works if you're Donald Trump. The guy who beat the Democrat Tester, we discussed this yesterday in Montana, was a guy who said he was wounded, I think in Afghanistan, but in war. And in fact, he was wounded in a national park in some hunting accident. It was overwhelmingly proven that he had lied, and he is the new senator-elect from the state of Montana.
There's a term called liar's dividends, and it's just kind of become popular. And this whole notion that lying is actually popular, right? You get a return on lying. And it's been used more frequently with Donald Trump, is that the studies are saying that people actually don't want the truth. They actually want to lie. And he's a master at it.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Margaret.
I just want to ask you, because you got to be a poll, or you volunteered to be a poll watcher yesterday in Michigan, one of the swing states. What was that like? What'd you learn?
So, I learned that our system's not perfect. Here, I wasn't even here, but I'm getting text messages while I'm in Michigan that the machines were down, they ran out of ballots, the police had to go get ballots and take ballots. This is all over the country, so our system is not perfect. And what we found, I was getting calls while I was there we call it the command center, and of course it's not partisan, but if they said, okay, we're at the polling location in Wayne County and we're out of ballots and people are gonna leave if they can't vote, or the power went out, or one of the things I don't know if you saw across the country, there were a ridiculous number of bomb threats at polling locations.
Mostly from Russians.
Georgia in particular.
Bots or whatever they were.
Yeah.
So the reality is that there's an after action that we need to do to talk about how our election was disrupted by the outside. And I think that was intentional. And then, of course, people showed up in ID states, and you have an ID, and of course, someone from their feelings, not from the law, not from the policy of that state, goes, oh, well, I don't accept that ID. We got those calls as well.
I have one last thing for you, if we can here. Tim Snyder, who's this political science guy at Yale, coined the term, which I'd never heard till the other day when it was repeated in Brian McGrory's column about Jeff Bezos killing the editorial the endorsement in favor of Harris in the Washington Post, anticipatory obedience, which I think is one of the most brilliant terms I've ever heard in my life. Nothing has happened yet. Trump hasn't asked you for anything else, but I'll be obedient in anticipation of being in a tough spot. You have been the leader of the health equity effort in the state. We talked to you about a lot. You've now been joined by scores of other leaders of color in the healthcare community. We talked about DEI being under attack, very powerful institutions in retreat, one of the most powerful institutions in the world, like Harvard University, a mile or so away from here. Is there going to be anticipatory obedience from otherwise committed people on issues like DEI and things like health equity, for fear of what may happen from a Trump administration?
That started before this election, right? Before this decision yesterday. People were already starting to retract their commitments after George Floyd and out of the COVID, around health equity and racial justice. So I think, ultimately, if you didn't want to do it, it's easy to withdraw, right? So there are some organizations, I'll be at an Eastern Bank advisory board meeting with Bob Rivers and his team tonight. I have confidence that Bob will stay with it, right? Though others in the financial industry will withdraw, because I think his compass is there. Like he knows what the right thing to do is. But across the country, if they did it because their employees said do it, right? We want to know what you're going to do about DEI, and you're the CEO, and I'm a CEO, and they say, okay, I'm going to do it. We're going to do some policy, going to hire a DEI person. Maybe we'll focus on health equity, or we'll invest in communities that have been historically marginalized. And then now Donald Trump wins, and the employees are sort of devastated and sort of feeling like, they say, okay, I'll withdraw that. We'll take that money back. We won't invest. We'll eliminate that position. That's already starting to happen. So I think ultimately we got to remember that the door doesn't stay open long. History tells us that. Progress always has a backlash. I even say this about the media, particularly for the two of you in the station, GBH. You are under threat, right? Because his old presidency, his whole rhetoric is about the media NPR, PBS.
That's right.
I'm desperate. I'm significantly concerned about the defunding of public television and radio, and that is next to come. And then, of course, mass, broad media, which he's attacked and he's gone after. He's even sued some of the major media stations for ridiculous reasons. Expect more of that.
Michael Curry, as always, our second historian of the day after Doris Kearns Goodwin. It's great to see you.
Do not put me in a category with her. I'm like a big fan of hers. So
are we. Michael, it's good to see you. Thank you so much.
Michael, thank you very much for coming in. You've been speaking with Michael Curry, the from the NAACP, CEO and President CEO of the Massachusetts League of Community Health Centers as well, who is obviously very concerned about what public health could be under the Trump administration. Member of the NAACP's National Board of Directors, where he chairs the board's Advocacy and Policy Committee. Goofed that up, Michael. Sorry.
That's all right.
Thank you very much for being...
You know why she did that? She wants to pretend if they ever come after her. Michael Curry? I don't know him.
I don't know him.
That's what Trump does all the time.
Just remember, you're both going to Image Awards with me. So
we
That's
are
right.
indeed.
We are going to
Believe
Image
me.
Award. We're very excited about it, too. Thank you very much,
See you,
Michael.
Thanks so much.
We're going to
Appreciate
open
it.
the phone and text lines again. It's sort of a therapy continuing session here at GBH. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Election night is behind us, but some races have yet to be called. We'll bring fact-based reporting to help you make sense of what's to come, plus the latest from the Harris and Trump campaigns and updates on ballot initiatives around the country and races that'll help decide the balance of power in the House and Senate. That's all on the next All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Johnson & Wales University, now offering 3-year career-focused bachelor's degrees in graphic design, computer science, criminal justice, and hospitality management. More at jwu.edu. And Rockland Trust Bank, committed to helping individuals and local businesses work towards their financial goals by providing financial advice and resources. More at rocklandtrust.org. Rockland Trust Bank, where each relationship matters. Member FDIC.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio with Marjorie Egan and Jim Browder. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. As promised, the final half hour of the show is all yours at 877-301-8970 to call or text anything you want to talk about in terms of the presidential election, results, what happens next. If you want to talk about the 5 ballot outcomes in Massachusetts, that is fine as well. And what we decided to do for this final segment, right over there is our colleague Nicole. There's a microphone there. If anybody in the studio here at the Newsfeed Cafe would like to make a comment and talk to us on the air, there's a pretty good chance you'll get to do that. So if you're in that category, just go see Nicole and she'll talk to you.
Okay, here are a couple of people that are appalled by what happened yesterday. Becky in Mattapan says she's coping by popping a sativa, listening to a lot of Springsteen, scrubbing her kitchen and her bathroom, and she's feeling a little bit better. And then Papa Jack from Hampton, New Hampshire says, let the grifting begin. And then here's a pro-Trump voter. He says, my name is Kevin. I live in the Cape. I voted for Trump. The first is threat of war. I feel like under the Biden-Harris administration, we're far closer to getting involved in large-scale war. I'm in my 20s and a fighting-age male. Seeing us get involved in proxy wars and sending troops to the Middle East really concerns me. The other main reason is the cost of housing. It concerns me how much housing costs have gone up under Biden-Harris. I worry I'll never be able to afford a house. And I think he touches on 2 things that some young men are thinking about.
Well, by the way, whether it's real or not, Vance, one of the few things I think he did effectively in this campaign after he recovered partially from the childless cat lady thing, is he talked about the war hawk nature, his term, not mine, of the Harris-Biden administration or Biden-Harris administration, how she would continue in the same way. I think that may have been effective, even though people suggest they don't care about foreign policy at all, which is a crime.
You know, Vance, in part of his career anyway, was more of a populist. I'm not sure where he is now as the vice president-elect, but...
What do you mean?
Well, he has expressed a lot more populist ideas about schools and about housing and about taxes and all those kinds of things.
He works for Donald Trump.
Well, he works for Donald Trump now. I mean, but he's part of that Josh Hawley kind of a little bit more populist end of the Republican Party, which is, he's talked about income inequality. He has talked about those things.
By the way, Josh Hawley, just as an aside, my favorite video, it's horrible to use that term. I shouldn't have said favorite. The video that most stays with me, other than the violence of the January 6th so-called hostages who may be pardoned by President Trump when he is president again, is, if you'll recall, Josh Hawley, who was reelected yesterday as a senator from Missouri. Remember, he gave the clenched fist to the rioters, and then when the rioters came into the Capitol, remember that video?
I do.
Like running a 100-yard dash, like a little scared little rabbit, because he's afraid they're going to go after him. And by the way, he is seen by many people as a very likely candidate for the Attorney General job, which is, I would say, a tad troubling. Anna in Middleborough, you're first on this hour, at least, on Boston Public Radio. Thank you for calling. Hi.
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 I've called in before, and I just wanted to weigh in on the election.
Please.
I'm very disappointed that the American people have chosen vengeance, chaos, racism, sexism, and authoritarianism. It was they made that choice. And over decency, civility, confidence, and democracy. And I'm deeply disappointed, and I would end with what is right isn't always popular, and what is popular isn't always right. And I'm on the outs.
Well, you may be on the outs by about 5 or 6 million votes. That is correct, Anna. Anna, thank you very much for the call. And what I mean by that, if you've missed it, is unlike the first two runs by Donald Trump, where he did not win the popular vote, he, as of an hour or two ago, was ahead in the popular vote by a little bit more nationally, by a little bit more than 5 million ballots. 877-301-8970.
Yeah, that undercuts all the get rid of the Electoral College arguments, at least for the time being.
Not for me, by the way, but in this case, he would have won, whether it's Electoral College, you're right, or popular vote.
You wouldn't believe some of the texts we get here. I'm not going to read them about things people say about Harris. It's really unbelievable.
Well, I mean, but those things were saying. The final speech, I believe in New Hampshire, we played this the other day by Vance, was criticizing the language of the Democrats, saying we don't ever call them garbage. And literally 30 seconds later in the same speech, he calls Kamala Harris trash. I mean, can you, I just...
I don't know why you have to do that. I just don't know why you have to
Because you
go
win,
there.
I guess, when you do it. Yeah, maybe that's why you do it.
But you know, Michael said something about human nature that is very interesting. About, you probably remember these kids from school or maybe from your office at work. The people that are bullies, the people that manipulate people, the people that tell one lie to one person, another lie to one person,
So Michael
everybody's
was saying,
fighting.
yeah.
And there's something oddly attractive to people. It defies logic, but about those kinds of people, and it's very difficult to stand up to them. What are you laughing at?
Suzanne in Merrimack texts and says, I could never have guessed that focusing on the colonoscopy I'm having tomorrow would be preferable to thinking about the next 4 years in this country. Matt and Lowell, thank you for calling. Welcome to the show. Hello.
Hi, thanks for taking my call.
Of course.
I have been formulating a theory leading up until this election, and unfortunately, the only way that I can see if it follows through as being true is if Trump was elected, which he now has been.
Mm-hmm.
And that theory is that, all we've been hearing is that this is going to be a rigged election. It's not going to be secure and safe. It's going to be stolen, all of this. Well, is that rhetoric all just going to be dropped now that he won? I mean,
yes.
Yes. Yeah, they're just all the lawsuits that are tying up the courts that they were prepared to fight through. It's just going to suddenly disappear.
Right.
Of course.
Yeah, there was all this rampant fraud in Pennsylvania. We heard before the voting began in Pennsylvania, because I think Trump was a little bit worried about Pennsylvania. Now that he won Pennsylvania, more talk about rampant fraud in Pennsylvania.
By the way, just yesterday, while the votes were being cast, Matt, there was a lawsuit filed by the Trump team about some made-up thing around a rigged election. And I read the decision from the judge dismissing it, who was as demeaning in his language towards the Trump people who filed it as you could be. And much to my joy, the judge was a Trump nominee who'd been confirmed, meaning he actually stood up for the Constitution rather than out of blind loyalty like Eileen Cannon in Florida. Matt, thank you for the call. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
You know, a couple of people, including Bob on the Cape that I just read, really thought that ad from The View where she was asked about what she would change from Biden, and she said, not a thing. And then
I can't really think of anything right now.
Yeah, and then at the end she said she put a Republican in her candidate. And they also talk all about the transgender ads that really, Bob thinks, hurt her. Okay, even though, as you pointed out a million times, the whole help for transgender people medically in prisons was started under Trump.
877-301-8970. And even had it not been, one campaign was trying to show some kindness towards people who are amongst the most oppressed in this society. And one campaign decided that preying on them was a ticket to election.
Linda from Quincy points out that kids always used to want to grow up to become president. Do we think this has changed after the results of yesterday's election? Is this the man we want our children to admire? And that is a good point, Linda.
Jamie, could you put on the screen the name of Doris Kearns Goodwin's book for kids, for teenagers, that we talked to her about a month ago? Because I'll tell you, if you believe that civic engagement at a young age is the way to cure what ails our society, this is a hell of a good start. It's a bio of 4 presidents she's done major work on, and it talks about their upbringing and how they got to be the leaders they were. It's called The Leadership Journey, How 4 Kids became a president. I think the 4 kids were the 2 Roosevelts, Lincoln, and I can't remember who the 4th was, but it's Lincoln, Roosevelt, and LBJ. Stephen Andover, welcome to the show. Hi.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi.
I heard you folks talking about how Kamala as well tried to harness the fear of him being a despot.
I said that.
But yeah, so certainly she did, and so did Biden. But that kind of fear requires a lot of knowledge and understanding of how that's going to affect international affairs and how that's going to affect people in the country. And you have to go back and listen to the things he said over time. But his kind of fear was just, you don't have to participate, and it doesn't have to be complicated.
I agree.
It's afraid. Yeah, just do just follow me. So, and there's this. I was doing some research about people in disaster situations and how there's a series of changes they go through mentally, and like they mill about and they end up following a leader, and they sort of evade their prefrontal cortex and act more in ape fashion. And I think that's a lot of what happened. And also, he's very good he just repeated the same thing. And I've been doing some reading about the brain, and repetition can sort of evade the prefrontal cortex as well and get things into your subconscious, and you just sort of believe they're true. So he used a lot of skill.
You know, can I speak to that repetition thing? We've said this before, Stephen. I'm sure you know it, but for those people who haven't seen it, our colleague here, Michael Kirk, who along with the frontline people are responsible for those brilliant documentaries done right before every 4-year election called The Choice, where they profile each of the major party candidates. The last round, when he was profiling Trump, he had video from when Trump was being sued for racial discrimination, and his lawyer was the notorious Roy Cohn, who obviously famous for going after the alleged communists with Senator McCarthy from Wisconsin. And the skill that he learned from Roy Cohn was to lie, but say it relentlessly again and again and again, and ultimately it becomes the truth. And I think, sometimes you hear him and you can't believe it, but I think your research suggests that Cohn was onto something, and sadly, Trump picked up the trait. Steve, thank you for the call.
That movie, The Apprentice, is worth seeing. The guy that played
You saw it?
Yes, it was terrific.
How was that?
It was great. Plus, it wasn't too long, Jim. You don't like them too long.
I don't like them too long.
And the guy that was in Succession that played one of the so-called
Jeremy,
Murdoch
whatever
sons,
his name
Jeremy
is.
Strong, I think
Strong,
his name
yeah.
plays Ray Cohn. He is terrific.
Roy Cohn, too.
He's going to be, Roy Cohn. He's going to be nominated for an Oscar. Listen to this. This is Dave from Rentham. This morning I ordered a We're Doomed bumper sticker in yellow and purple from Zazzle.com. I'm also going to fly my flag at half-staff until Trump is out of office. Bobby Kennedy's slogan should be, make polio great again.
It is, by the way, this is, for whatever it's worth, if you just tuned in, for those who think this Robert Robert F. Kennedy thing in charge of the public health infrastructure of the country was just rhetoric from Trump. He mentioned him last night, and as I said, I'm pretty sure I got this right, even though I was exhausted when I heard Trump speak. When he mentioned RFK Jr., the crowd,
They did.
They start chanting Bobby, Bobby, Bobby. And I think it's reasonable to think that a decent number of working class Americans who idolized the Kennedys were sort of moved in the direction of Trump because of the Kennedy connection. And he's going to be in a high place, a guy who's a vaccine denier and more.
Here's a Trump texter. I live in southern New Hampshire in an affluent community. All my 30-something parent friends voted on the line. For the Republicans, we did it for the safety and future of our children. Thank God most of the country agrees with us. So there you go. And then we have somebody who woke up this morning determined not to listen to the radio, but they did change their mind and been listening to us. And this person says, I admit I'm feeling better. By the way, I am a therapist. You would think I could do better than that.
Well, thank you. By the way, as I said it early in the show, and I know I speak for Marjorie, hopefully this helps you and you learn something too, but it helps us and talking to you guys, and we try to learn something too. The number's 877-301-8970. Again, if you're at the library and would like to talk to us, you can just go to Nicole and she'll try to get you on the radio. Where do you want to go?
Laura in Rockport, thank you for calling.
Hello, Laura.
Hi, Jim and Marjorie. I hope I didn't miss the previous discussion, but I hope we're laying blame where it squarely belongs, which is at the feet of Joe Biden.
For what reason?
He prevented every registered Democrat from nominating somebody that could really beat Trump. We were force-fed Kamala Harris, and, you know, people vote for individuals. And in the end, I don't think she stood much of a chance. And we haven't heard anything from Joe Biden about his responsibility for what's happened, but I think it's squarely on his shoulders.
By the way, is you're concerned about Harris because you don't think she ran a good campaign? Because I do, but mostly.
Oh, no, I think she did the best that she could.
But you meant because people felt they were denied a small d Democratic opportunity to pick the nominee.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, I mean, Marjorie's a huge, she and James Carville, who's with us the other day, are totally with you. He said at the time there should be small town hall meetings. I think he said that people like Clinton and Obama should pick 8 leading Democrats who can be in the field. So you're not alone in your view, Laura. Thanks for the call.
Laura, you get better and better. I mean, I remember when I first saw Barack Obama in a debate, and I thought, what is the big deal about this guy? He's not so great. Well, he got better and better and better. I mean, it's a skill being able to answer those questions. And I think she would have benefited, and it might not have ended up being Harris. I don't know. Might have anyway. But everybody benefits from being challenged.
Totally agree.
You know, people that are in the little debating society. I should have been in the debating society in high school.
You weren't? You were on cheerleading squad instead. Well, by the way, you know what's a good example of that? Do you not think if she was in a primary and she was asked the question, where do you differ with Joe Biden, and was ridiculed every time she says nowhere or I can't think of anything,
she would have stopped saying it.
She probably would have stopped saying it. That's a very good point.
And also, obviously, she was a prosecutor, and how much did that help her in the debate with Trump?
She was
really good in that debate.
Was.
And people that say she can't read off a teleprompter, what are they talking about? There was no teleprompter at the debate, except for maybe the beginning and end, hello and goodbye. Greg?
No, there was no teleprompter. For the candidates?
Yes.
At the debate?
Well, I don't know if they said something,
debate.
Thank you very much, I'm Kamala Harris or whatever.
They memorized, but there's no teleprompter for the candidates.
Greg in Rhode Island, thank you for calling.
Hello, Greg.
Hey, hi, guys.
Hi.
Actually, all she can do is read off the teleprompter. That was the problem. Off the top of her head, that wasn't so good.
Hold on, Greg. We just talked about the debate in which she kind of crushed Trump.
With no teleprompter.
So how did the whole plan was, how can I irritate Trump and get under his skin?
Yeah.
But that was the plan. That's why we should elect her, because she irritated him. That's what she did. Anyway.
Greg, instead of yelling at us, can I just ask you a question, and then you maybe calmly can answer it? At the end of that debate, you didn't think that she had performed better than Donald Trump?
Did she do anything other than try to just say he's a terrible, horrible person? The two moderators that fact-checked Trump 6 times, which they were wrong on one of them or 2 of them, nothing for her. Anyway, a few callers back, Anna called in and was upset that the election was racist and sexist. When Kamala ran in the Democrat primary, you know where I'm going, 20 candidates, 2%. Were the Democrats all racist and sexist? Who didn't like her then?
I mean, she ran 4 years ago. Hey, Greg, can I give you a little piece of advice for next time you call back? If you don't yell at us, we'll probably do a little better. But thank you for your call. We'll try the non-yelling version
I think
next time you call in.
He was very angry.
No, he's entitled to his opinion, and we'd love you to call back. Just calm down a little bit, and we'll probably have a better back and forth. 877-301-8970 is the number. And by the way, one of the things that concerns me the most is what happens with the federal judiciary, where there are enough votes to confirm, I would say, almost anybody that Donald Trump nominates, despite their bias, lack of legal knowledge, lack of preparation for the job, like Eileen Cannon, who was in charge of that case in Florida. There are enough votes to confirm virtually anybody to the district courts, the appellate courts, federal, and probably to the Supreme Court, should there be an opening. It's a pretty big deal.
Let's go to Nivea in Wellesley. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Hi there.
Hi, my name is Lydia. Thank you so much.
Hi.
The reason why I vote for Trump and what you are missing is that people like to be working peacefully and do the right thing. In the meantime, all the Democrats, especially the government right now, they are not doing what the people want. That's why you're not getting it. You said that Trump is basically taking the whole, that he was smarter in the way he did it. And he wasn't. It's just that we voted for what we needed. Please wake up.
Can I ask
What
you?
is
Oh,
it?
God.
What is it?
It's Lydia, by the way, not Nivea.
I'm sorry. I mispronounced your name. I apologize. What is it that you wanted most? What is it that you voted for Trump to get?
The first time I didn't, but the second time I did, it's because I wanted peace in the world. I feel that he's able to negotiate with the Russians as well with the Ukrainians and with Israel, and not just, and mostly I think that he's saying things that are true to me. I mean, things like what happened in China. China was abusing of our system, and they are wonderful people. But the policies for the Democrats are not there.
Well, I would say, Lydia, the people of China, and I have 2 Chinese American daughters, are great. I'm not sure the government is the same. Lydia, our colleague just wrote us a note, Zoe, and I want to say, we want to, thank you for your call and say you were able to articulate your support for Trump without yelling at us and getting angry, and that means a lot to us. So we hope you call back, Lydia. Thank you for voicing your opinion. At the mic in the Newsfeed Cafe, Geraldine, is that how I pronounce your name?
Yes.
Welcome. Good to talk to you. What's up?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm here visiting from Ireland.
Oh, great. Welcome.
And I'm just travelling back in the afternoon, heading to the airport. I'm shocked, stunned, and upset over the outcome of the election. We're following it in Ireland and Europe, very much as you are, and we're all devastated. And I want to thank Boston Public Radio for giving us the feedback and the sense of opportunity to explore the emotional fallout that we're feeling today, because I've been asked by people, well, what's it like over there? What are they saying? How do they feel about it? And now, having had just this experience, I just came in for coffee, didn't expect any of this. We were going through the library, and I'm really feel now grounded and understanding of how locally you are feeling about it. And I must say I welcome Michael Curry's talk. It was absolutely excellent. The grounding he gave us, the understanding of the personality type that we can all identify with. And as he said, it's how he makes people feel, the Maya Angelou expression, how he makes people feel, and that's what he did. And we've watched I remember I was here a good few years ago, I said I wouldn't come during the last Trump presidency, I wouldn't come to the States. But now I'm lucky, I kind of feel I'm going, and I feel sad that I'm leaving today because I came last week with great hope. I have my Kamala hat ready to rock with it and show it off, but I'm going to wear it.
2 things, Geraldine. 1, you couldn't have been kinder. You can listen to us streaming, by the way, from Ireland.
I'm going to,
And
yes.
number 2, because she's too shy to ask, Is there a seat next to you on the plane back to Ireland for Marjorie? Or
Well, we all joke about having grandparents that came from other countries because my grandparents were from Ireland. You can get the second passport, so I may be visiting you soon.
We have heard of people saying if you know of properties or if something is coming up. But just interesting what Michael had said about Irish immigrants.
Mm-hmm.
I was just reading about that out there in the courtyard, how immigration, this nativist approach, that when the Irish were coming in, it was the same. And when Michael mentioned it, I thought it was very interesting how it's cyclical, and how do we explain this to our young people. So thank you, Boston.
you are
Public
fabulous.
Radio.
You made our day, Geraldine.
Thank
that
you
was
very
great.
much.
Thank you. Come back again soon. 877, you will?
Yes.
Oh, she loves Boston. She said the mic was turned off. Thank you. That was terrific. Made us feel really good. 877-301-8970.
Here's one from Paula and Hingham. We get the government we deserve. Remember, Mussolini made the trains run on time.
Yeah. Let's go to John in Norwalk, Connecticut. Hey, John, welcome.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
I really think that Doris Kearns Goodman really crystallized probably the situation. It's full of government as an overarching theme. And me, as a Republican, I want smaller government. I want it out of my life. I don't want my tax dollars being spent on foreign wars, on illegal immigrants, on transgender surgeries, on transgender drugs for children especially, which is a disaster. And the Democratic position is just the opposite.
John, can I ask you a question? Since the first thing you mentioned was you want a smaller government, so let me make up a hypothetical. If somebody was running for president who had put in place the largest deficit over 4 years in American history, you'd never vote for that person, would you?
If the deficit occurred because of tax breaks, I would. And that's what happened.
You knew the answer. That, of course, was Donald Trump.
He lowered the taxes.
Yeah.
So, in the short term, the deficit will appear to go up, but you have to bring costs in line with what your income is, just like everybody does with their budget. So
John,
we've got Elon Musk now who will be working for us in the Department of Government Accountability, and we're going to lower by $2 trillion the spending of the federal government. And right there, that's the way to go. And
John, how much should Trump? John, it's not a monologue. How much should Trump lower the spending of the federal government in his 4 years?
No, I didn't say he did.
No, I just said you just said he's going to lower the cost, the spending of government, $2 trillion. Did he lower the cost of the level of spending even $1 when he was president? No,
he did not have Elon Musk in his cabinet.
Okay, Elon Musk. Okay,
no, he didn't.
Got it. No, we got it. John, we appreciate it. Call us again. Thank you very much. Trump voter from Norwalk.
I think if you get rid of $2 trillion, you'd be getting rid of Medicare, Social Security.
Well, there's very little discretionary spending in the budget.
Yeah, that's what the big stuff is. It's stuff that I think most people do like to look forward to their Social Security when they retire. I always wonder why we don't raise the cap on Social Security.
You mean the tax cap?
The tax cap, yeah. What is it, $160,000?
It's something like that, which means, for those who don't know, if you make $150,000, you pay the exact same Social Security tax that Elon Musk does, for example, because you don't pay any tax on anything over that absurdly low threshold. In any case, thank you, whoever, I might have forgot the name, from Norwalk, Connecticut. We appreciate it. We have time for, I think, one more. You want to squeeze one in?
Katie in Rhode Island. Thanks for calling.
Hi, Katie. Welcome.
Hi, guys. It's your favorite aggressive cleaner.
Hey, Katie. Good to talk to you. What's up?
Hi. So I thought before Doris was even on today that being a mom of two young boys, the only option I have is to be hopeful. And yes, I was devastated this morning, but my little 8-year-old actually wanted to get on air with you guys yesterday. He was on during a snowstorm last year.
I remember. I remember it totally.
My goodness,
I do, of course.
Yes. So whenever he's home on a day, he says, "Mom, can we call in a Jim and Marjorie?"
That is great. That is great.
Sunday morning, he asked me, "Mommy, what time is that Meet the show on? Meet the Press?" And he said, "Yeah. They're just going to talk about Kamala the whole time, right?" And I said, "Oh, a lot, and Trump." He sat down for an hour at 8.5 years old and sat at my kitchen island listening to Meet the Press. And all I have to say is Doris Kearns Goodman was incredible.
She's always incredible. And as we said before, when I was introducing her, if you could have dreamed last night who the perfect guest the day after was, it was Doris Kearns Goodwin. Katie, thank you for the call. Say hi to your incredible 8.5-year-old. We really appreciate you calling.
Guys, let's get out there and get involved in our community.
Thank you, Katie. We really appreciate it.
I just got a text from someone that says Berklee College of Music is offering therapy or help coping with anybody who needs it today. I think there's a lot of people feeling like that. You have any suggestions for how people can cope,
do
Jim?
something. I think exactly what Katie said. Do something. I mean, the reality is if you're disappointed yesterday, you lost an election by a lot of electoral votes and by, 5 or 6 million votes, do something.
We have Jared over Zoom. Hi,
Hey,
Jared.
Jared Bowen. How are you?
Hey, it's great to see you both.
You as well. What are you doing today?
We're going to be talking, we have two pretty great guests, too, following your lead with Doris Kearns Goodwin. We have Tracy K. Smith, who is the former U.S. Poet Laureate.
Oh, I know that, yes.
Pulitzer Prize winner.
Yeah.
We'll be talking about her plea for the American soul, as she subtitled her most recent book. And so we'll spend a lot of time talking about that and the deep thinking she's done as a poet. And we'll also speak with Susan Glisson. You may remember we've spoken to her before. Her whole life's work is in reconciliation. She is the one who brought Tallahatchie County to apologize to the family of Emmett Till and brought the descendants of the Robert E. Lee family together with the descendants of people enslaved by Robert E. Lee. A celebration, they ultimately called it, and we'll do it again. So there is a path to togetherness.
That's a fabulous lineup for a very important day. Jared, good to see you. We'll be listening. By the way, we have confirmed, if it wasn't clear before, when Kamala Harris gives her speech from her alma mater, Howard University, scheduled for 4 o'clock today. We don't know if it'll happen at 4. 89.7 will carry it live. I would not miss that. Where are you?
Okay, are we
Done.
done?
We're done.
Okay. Thank you very much for listening to another edition of Boston Public Radio. Thank you to the people that came down to the
Really
Boston Public
appreciate you
Library
coming
today.
today, especially.
I want to mention,
Thank
I'm doing an event at the JFK Library on Tuesday with Pulitzer Prize winning former columnist of the Boston Globe, Eileen McNamara, and Heather Cox Richardson, that writes a great column on Substack, which if you haven't seen it, look at it. It's very soothing. So if anybody wants, we're supposed to talk about the election. Anyway, but that's going to happen Tuesday night. If anybody wants to look into that at the JFK Library. And keep up with us 24/7 by our podcast, or check out our TikTok page at Boston Public Radio. Tomorrow, NBC's Chuck Todd, former Massachusetts Public Safety Secretary Andrew Cabral. I'm sure she's happy about the election. Former Massachusetts Education Secretary Paul Revel, and Boston Globe business columnist Shirley Leung. Our crew, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss, our engineer John LaClaw Parker, our executive producer Jamie Bologna. Special thanks to our team here at the Boston Public Library, Maddie Geyer, Patrick Lally, Juan Jose Cadena, and thanks to our host at the Newsfeed Cafe and across the street at the Lenox Hotel. You can stay tuned to Jared Bowen and the Culture Show right after the 2 o'clock news here on 89.7 GBH.
Can I add one thing in addition to your wonderful forum next Tuesday? Tonight, if you need a break and a little soothing, Marjorie and I are interviewing our buddy Cy Montgomery with the new books about chickens. And if you really need a break from the unsoothing news of the last 24 hours, Arts at the Armory in Somerville. Check it out. Join us. I think it'll be worth your time. That's it again. Thank you all for coming. Marjorie, I'm Jim Browdy.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Thanks again for tuning in today. Hope you can tune in tomorrow. And hope you can get through the rest of the day without too much angst. Thanks for listening.